Welcome to the discussion of the road. Are you ready, brother?
I gotta say, I don't think you can really be ready for this.
Yeah, it's true. So you watched the movie.
I watched the movie yesterday.
How do you feel?
To paraphrase Clank from 2016's Ratchet and Clank, I'm experiencing conflicting feelings. Because on one hand, I think this is an excellent film and an excellent story depicting the reality of a society-ending event.
Mm-hmm.
Because most stories are fantasy versions of that idea. The Walking Dead, The 100, Rage, Last Man on Earth, Book of Eli, they're all fantasy versions of this world. Stylized imagery, interesting characters, societies that would never have come about in our old world. Like Walking Dead has these fucking trash people who live in like a junkyard and shit. It's like really cool stuff. In this,
it's so unreal though.
In this, it's like the reality, which is that food is a horribly scarce thing, ammunition is horribly scarce, everything is shit. The only people who have survived are the most ruthless or the people who have hid for a long time. So I like the story and respect it, but fucking hated watching the movie and had to push myself through the 2 hours of sadness. It doesn't even end positively. It's kind of a happy ending, and it sort of makes a couple connections to later, to earlier things that were said, but it doesn't really end positively.
No, it doesn't. It's not meant to make you feel warm and fuzzy.
No.
What I appreciated about it, because I never noticed from reading the book, but all of the really egregious shit happens at the beginning, and it gives you time to relax before the ending of the story.
I found that it pretty consistently throws horrible shit. Like it's like, it starts off with the awful shit where it's like one of the first moments in the movie is him reminding the kid how to kill himself if they get captured.
Yes,
and then
which is not actually where it happens in the book.
Oh, okay.
It actually happens outside of the cannibal house.
Oh.
That's where he tells him, because he's like, I might have to get up and run to distract them, and if I do, take the gun and he shows him how to do it.
Jeez.
So they actually went through huge chunks of the book in the first 10 seconds, because in the first 10 seconds they were eating mushrooms and doing this other thing, and they walk past this thing, and I was like, fuck, that's so many pages of the book. There's so many pages, but mostly irrelevant pages. So the big things were the truck scene.
Yes, the truck
scene. The house with the cannibals.
Yeah.
Those two scenes fucked me up.
Yeah.
I sat down to watch the movie at 9:00 one night. Not a good plan.
I actually intentionally avoided watching this
at night.
At night, yeah.
Yeah. So I got through the truck scene.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the truck scene ended, it showed the house. And I recognized the house by description. Because I remembered from the book, the big columns, it was a wealthy house, where it should be situated.
Did you not see the movie? Or a long time ago?
I have read the book 3 times and only seen the movie twice. So actually the book is fresher in my mind.
Well, because I remember it basically every part.
Okay, because I didn't. As soon as I saw the columns of the house, I was like, fuck it, I'm going to bed. I couldn't, man. I had to do that part in the daylight, that scene.
So they very vaguely describe what it is that happened that changed the world so drastically.
Yeah.
But my guess is it's an asteroid, right? Because all the power's out, the trees are fucked, and the world just crumbled. My guess is that it was something that it was something that hit the earth so hard that the electromagnetic whatever took out electronics, and then the dust cloud killed all the plants, which killed all the animals.
Interesting.
He also describes a big a great fire or something like that.
Well, yeah, so he said there was a flash of light followed by a series of low concussions. So to me, that's a series of nuclear explosions. Because the light would arrive to you before the sound would, and that's why he saw it and then heard it. And it would explain why the world is so ruined, because it's covered in ash. You barely see the sun. It's essentially a nuclear winter. Something that was pointed out, because I went and watched a YouTube video where someone was summarizing it, and he pointed out that these characters have survived to the point where there's almost no one left. They go days between seeing people.
Well, this is 10 years in.
At least.
Because the son is born
in the
apocalypse, and he's probably, 9 or 10?
Yeah. So that just proves how tough they are.
Well, here's the thing. In most apocalypse films or TV shows, 99% of the population is wiped out super quick. So there's enough resources for everyone, but there's less than 1% of the population. So like in Walking Dead, eventually they find giant barrels of gasoline and huge shipments of food because there's enough food, gas, and bullets for 300 million people in the States.
And now they're dead.
Now there's 200,000 people. There's like so much shit out there. That's why like in what's that Will Smith one? I Am Legend.
Oh.
He has like so much shit to get.
He's infinite resources.
Because like the whole like New York is there for him. So like he finds one building and he's got everything he needs.
Whereas with this one, the world went to shit slowly.
The society collapsed and 100% of the people took the shit. So it's all gone now. That's the reality of a world-ending event. Is most likely that's how it would end. Is the people pull it apart, not some virus or an explosion. It would most likely be the people who destroy each other until there's almost no one left because there's no resources, which is why they find nothing anywhere, which is why when they find, I love how there's this beautiful moment in the film where they're on the brink and they find a shelter filled with shit, just like filled to the brim with food and all this stuff. And then he's like, no, we have to leave. Like, it was like they had this beautiful moment where they, like, cut their hair and clean themselves.
Yeah.
And they eat, like, crazy amounts of food. Like, they just fucking chow. And then he's like, oh, nope, someone found us. Fuck it, we're leaving. And they have to just immediately move on.
Yep.
Even in, like, the beautiful moments.
There is no haven. There's no...
No.
And during that scene in the book, he's actually kind of questioning whether it was worth finding it at all or if things would be better if they had starved to death. Because... every day is a challenge. And right near the man's death, the kid asks him, he says, what's the hardest thing you've ever done? And the dad says, getting up this morning.
Oh, Jesus.
And then he says, no, don't listen to me. I'm just being silly. But he's not really being silly because it would almost be much better for the both of them if a rock fell from the sky and crushed them instantly. Because what he doesn't want is to have to watch his son die.
Right.
That's the big thing. And there's many scenes where he talks about, will you be able to kill him when the time comes? There's a scene in the book where he says, if you didn't have the gun, would you be able to smash his head in with a rock? Jesus. Because you might have to, right?
Well, and then they use one of the bullets. He mentions in the beginning of the film
that they have two bullets.
They have two bullets, one for me, one for you.
Yeah.
Which is where the movie immediately establishes what kind of apocalypse story you're watching here. This is real. This is not, we're going to find a samurai sword and get two zombies to be our bodyguards type of story. This is like the world is awful. People don't even have shoes anymore. And and people are like, what I loved about Charlize Theron's character is that she the biggest argument her and the guy have is whether we should die now
or later
or push it on and like potentially become captured and have a worse fate than death. And the movie then he represents like the hope of humanity essentially. And he keeps going on. He keeps saying, no, we can't give up. We have to keep going. And the movie throws every reason to give up at you over and over again. And what I love about the movie is that all the characters are miserable, even the ones that are doing well. Like the first cannibal house they find, those people fucking hate their lives. They're like, I remembered them as being like happy people because they were like, they're on top now. But they fucking hate it too.
Oh yeah,
they come back from their cannibal hunting party and they're all just like quiet and sad. And like one guy's like, "Who wants a drink?" And they're just like miserable because nobody's happy in this world.
Yeah, all you can do is stay alive. You know the old man that they meet along the road, Eli?
One of the best characters.
Yeah, one of the best characters. The most cryptic character.
Yes.
By a significant margin. Well, all this shit he says is so useless.
Well, you think that he's an enemy.
At first,
For a while there, I was thinking like because is it John? Is that the name of the guy?
He's the man.
I swear she calls him John.
Maybe she does, but I didn't notice that. She doesn't in the book, that's for sure.
Oh, okay.
He's only ever the man. And it's confusing as fuck the way Cormac McCarthy writes this.
So it's the man and the boy? Is that how they write it?
The man and the boy.
Eli at first seems like a very, like he's just like he's not frightening at all. He's not scary. He's like the first character who's like, I personally was not concerned about until the man becomes concerned about him. And I didn't really clue in on why he didn't want to have dinner with this guy. It's because they then have to go to sleep next to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he pulls the gun out and says, like, see that? Because they're just talking about how, like, the guy says, I don't have very good eyesight. And he's like, oh, yeah? Can you see me right now? And he's waving his hand. He pulls the gun out and he's like, do you see that? And the guy's like, yeah, I see that.
In the book, when they first meet him, he's looking up and down the road constantly because he thinks that this guy is a distraction while the other people sneak up on them. And that's why he doesn't let him hold his hand. And he's like, don't hold his hand. Because he might just snatch the boy and go running. You know, he looks old, but maybe he's not as old as he looks.
And he's like, how old are you, old man? I'm 90. And he's like, 90 my ass. Is that what you tell people to get them to stop hurting you or something like that?
Does it work? No.
Not at all.
Not at all, yeah. Well, the best thing that Eli says is he says, everything will be better for everyone when we're all dead. And he's right. Everyone will be happier when they're dead because they won't have to put up with this shit.
Yeah.
All these characters, or at least the man and the boy, it's not really depicted well in the movie, but they wear masks over their face through the entire story.
Oh.
Yeah, because there's so much dust in the air that, well, that's what kills the man. Right? The man coughs up a lung because he's been inhaling nuclear dust for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
And you don't even think about that in the movie because it would have been too hard to properly display it.
I assumed that he was dying because he was alive during the event and that the kid was doing much better because he was born into it.
I think it's just because he's older. And I just think also he puts himself through more. He protects the kid at the cost of his own.
Protect him a lot.
Right.
And which is kind of a selfish move because he knows that he's going to be dead eventually and that this kid's going to have to fend for himself as a child. He really should have put that kid in a lot more scenarios where he had to be the one to do shit because he's gonna have to.
It's true. He didn't
really. Like, that kid's fucked when the guy dies. Like the first time I watched it, I'm like, this kid's fucked. What is he gonna do? Like, find safe haven?
Mm-hmm. So the thing I will say, well, I'll start by saying this book is written really weird in that there's no quotation marks in the book. Yeah.
Oh, it's something the man said, the man or whatever?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. And there is a lot of conversations. Like, I could just flip this book open and find one of the conversations the man and the boy has. And a lot of them go back and forth in this really, yeah, it's filled with, he's like, yeah, there's refugees potentially. And he says, like us? Yes, like us. But what if it's the bad guys? Well, we'll have to take that risk. Okay. Like, there's a lot of that.
Oh, geez.
There's a lot of okay. They say that word maybe 100 times in it. Or, I'm scared. It's all right. No, it's not. It's just a dream. I'm really scared. I know. So, like, there's a lot of that.
Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah. And it's kind of cool that every character is described more by what they are than who they are. So there's the man, the boy, then there's the old man, who we find out is Eli. There's the thief. There's the cannibals. All these people have these designations. And then later when he's talking to the man who comes to talk to the boy at the end of the book, he's now referred to as the man. Because the other man's dead, so you don't have to worry about him anymore.
Maybe the book was intended to be from the perspective of the boy.
I personally thought the book was from the perspective of the man. I feel like the book is a narration by the perspective of the man.
It is narrated.
Which to me makes me wonder if the boy ever found anyone else, or if that's the man's...
It's a wishful thinking.
It's the man's dream, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's very unreal. It's like, as soon as his father dies, these other people are like, hey, you want to come with us and we'll protect you?
Well, and they also...
And they have kids? My guess is...
Dude, that perfectly lines up. Because the kid hears a dog, and the dad says it's not a dog. But there's a dog with the group. The kid finds a boy that the dad never sees. The dad tells him there was no boy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then he also mentions that we've been following you. The man refers to two different people and says, why are you following us? He's going crazy. He's at the end of his life, and he's terrified of what's going to happen to his son, and he thinks they're being followed. Nobody in that world has the resources to follow somebody. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Not for that long.
To me, because the boy got sick,
Mhm.
and then very shortly after that, after the boy got better, the father gets sick and dies.
When does the boy get sick? Oh, he throws up.
Yeah, and he has to like nurse him back to health. And it's kind of funny in the book. In the book, he actually nurses the boy back to health. In the movie, he doesn't, because the boy gets sick and then the cart gets stolen. And so he's like, fuck you, don't be sick, I need you to run. And then
That kid is a fucking idiot.
well,
The guy stole the tent over top of him.
that's so true.
How fucking sleepy do you have to be
That is
to
true.
let that shit happen?
You also have to remember if you haven't eaten in a couple of days and then you have an illness.
I don't know about
I don't know.
that, man.
I
Like,
don't know either.
The kid was born. 10 years he's spent in
In
a
that
world where everyone that you meet could kill you, and you sleep outside at night. His everything about his his subconscious is always searching for like danger. He would wake up so easily. Everyone in that world would wake up easy. Nobody sleeps well in this new world.
That's true. Nobody sleeps. And he hears his father coughing off in the distance all the time.
Yeah.
So he probably, that didn't happen in the book. That's not how it happened. They came back and it was gone.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, also, like, the way they cut that scene, the dad gets to the ship and back so fast. It's like a minute.
Well, especially because it's a fucking freighter.
It's really far
It's
away.
supposed to be a sailboat. It's supposed to be a
Oh,
much
really?
smaller boat.
I actually I like the aesthetic of having the crash.
He
ship,
searches
but-
a freighter and comes back with like a handful of things. You
Yeah.
figure a freighter would have a little more.
He comes
than
back
that
with a
on
flare
it.
gun. That's it. He finds a flare gun.
Yeah.
A single flare gun.
Which he finds a lot more in the sailboat than they let on in that movie. But my theory is almost that the boy got sick and died, and then the man immediately after fell sick and died, but that's how his brain chose to
Coped.
interpret the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But either way, it's more of a conspiracy theory than anything.
I love the way they wove in God-related stuff. When he says something about if the word of God is something...
If he is not the word of God, God never spoke.
And his idea is that the boy is like a gift from God, because otherwise, how could he have allowed a child to be born into this world, essentially?
Well, that in a way, but also that he is the only child that the man knows of that's actually being protected. Because so let me get the man off the hook a little bit with the following thing. They kind of played that one up in the movie. So the movie, I would say, is probably one of the most accurate remakings of a book I've ever seen. Part of me even wants to do a movie or a video on it later, like how well they did it and why it came out so well. They used, honestly, almost every word of dialogue in the movie comes right out of the book, like verbatim, most of them.
Dumbledore said calmly.
Oh, yeah. Did you put your name in the goblet of fire? Yeah. They did a fantastic job because there aren't that many scenes in the book. Most of the book is they walked for 4 days and they tried to scrounge food and found nothing. Like, there's a lot of that.
I love the scene where the man takes his ring off, his wedding ring, and he pushes it with one finger across the top of the bridge. It's like, it's such an excellent way to, like, it's wordless storytelling, which is probably my favorite style of storytelling. He takes his wallet out, which has like photographs and shit in it, and he fucking tosses it over the bridge. He doesn't care about that anymore. But when he takes the ring off, he slowly pushes it over to the edge and then hesitates before. Does he actually push it? Or does he leave it there?
I think he pushes it over the edge.
But I love the way he pushes it across the table, because it says everything about the hesitation. He wants it. He wants the most amount of time he can spend doing this, even though he wants to get rid of it.
Yeah, it's a hard thing.
Also, go ahead.
No, that is actually how it happens in the story.
Oh,
he
okay.
sits down, lays out all the things from his wallet on the road, and then they just leave. They just,
I think it's really interesting that all of his... I gotta say, as much as he misses his wife, I think she was a bitch, because all of his memories of her are
terrible.
Are of her being like kind of a selfish bitch. Like, she's always like sleeping or like pretending she doesn't care about stuff, and he's the one going for her to like try to be close to her, and she's doing that catty, like, no, don't, no, I'm sleeping here. Like, why are you sleeping? She's always sleeping. She's laying down in like all of his memories. It's like that was your favorite moment with your wife of how many years was all those times you watched her sleeping?
The man actually refuses to try and think about good things because his theory is that once you start to think about happy thoughts, you've given up.
Oh.
So yeah, because if you start to dream about a good world, it means that you are giving up your fight in this world.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So whenever he has good dreams, he tries to wake himself from them. He's even practiced at waking himself from good dreams.
And he does, actually.
Yeah.
In the movie, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll let him off the hook a little bit when it comes to the following thing. So in the book, he believes he's being followed at three separate occasions, sorry. The first time he thinks they're being watched, that's when they A, hear the dog, and B, see the kid all at the same time. So, or no. That's a good point. There's two dogs actually in the book. When he sees the boy, he hears the dog, and then there's also the dog later when they're in the cellar, right? When they're in the bunker.
But they would be connected, right?
Probably the same dog, potentially, because the odds of there being dogs are low. But he believes he's being followed that first time when they see the kid. And then later on, he believes they're being followed, and then they stop off to the side of the road to check. And sure enough, 4 people come down the road following them.
That didn't happen in the movie.
No, not at all. So these 4 people go past them, and then they resume their trip the next morning, and they see a trail of smoke coming out of some trees. So they go over to find out what it is. The 4 people that went walking past, there was 3 men and a woman. And the woman was pregnant when they went walking past. Then the next day, they find their fire with a baby cooking over.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And that's part of why he believes that the boy is a gift from God, because no other baby would be protected because of how much of a liability it is.
Right.
His is the only child that's actually going to make it because he wanted it to. And so that obviously really fucks up the kid too, because the kid sees it. And
I love that scene, like the second cannibal scene, when like the man is significantly actually, I guess I should go back. So the first cannibal scene, I fucking love the visual storytelling. The man knows in the back of his head that this is a cannibal site. He knows that people are coming back, but he is so he needs to find something there so badly that he ignores all of the information, and the kid figures it out too. The kid keeps saying, "We need to leave. We need to not be here." There's stacks of wood. There's like fresh shit out. There's a couple other things. Oh, all the boots,
the clothes,
and all the clothes,
that's
and the
boots big
boots
one.
and the bags in piles and shit. Everything points to that, and the kid figures it out. He knows something's wrong, and the dad chooses to not remember. He chooses to not take that information in, and they almost die for it. Yep. The second time, he immediately acknowledges that this is a cannibal site, and they just book it out of there, and they also survive because of that.
Sorry, what's the second time?
The second cannibal scene, they see like skulls mounted on pikes, and then they start to run, and they end up in a field where there's just blood and footprints everywhere, but no bodies, and they end up seeing that woman and her child get like hacked to pieces.
Yeah.
And it's the only reason why they get out is because they had that first instance where they were so close to dying, is that this time he wasn't like, we need to search this place.
No, fuck that.
They just got the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
And that's when the trees start to fall over, which I thought was a really great part of the film, because that's how it would work. Like eventually the trees would rot so badly
that they wouldn't be holding themselves.
The weight of them would cause them to come down.
Yeah, that actually happens when they're sleeping in the book.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so there's snow on the ground. So they're sleeping under the tree because it's the only spot there isn't snow. There's like 1.5 feet of snow, and then they're in that little nook under the tree when they start to fall.
Oh, geez.
And it's dark. So essentially what they do, because you know how they kind of like get themselves into a tree and that protects them? Basically, they just hope. Yeah. In the book, they just find a place, hunker down, and hope the trees don't fall on them.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's terrifying. But the guys running across the field was done in the book, but a little differently. So in the book, they wake up one day, and coming down the road is a legitimate army.
What?
Yeah. So there's row on row of soldiers carrying pipes, and then behind them are guys with spears, and then behind them are guys like carrying the commander.
What?
And then behind them is like the women and the other slaves, and Yeah, so an actual army rolls past them down the road.
Holy.
And so that's what they were trying to do with that scene, trying to get the same feeling.
There's no sense of order in this movie, though. That would have been a really good scene. Because that's what I'm loving about Walking Dead, is that it keeps progressing in the way that that society would eventually recuperate. Everybody spreads out, and then they group up into small groups. Those groups find each other, become small, like settlements, and eventually settlements group up to become almost like cities. And in Walking Dead, there's 3 major cities with alliances against each other, and one city that is so much more powerful than the rest of them that it controls the other 3 cities. That's how it would work.
That's how it would work, yeah.
We would eventually group up in larger and larger numbers, the same way the walkers do, where the sound of a group of walkers attracts more walkers.
Yeah, and they make massive herds.
And they end up being a giant herd. People would do the same thing. And that's what Fallout is so cool about. It's in Fallout, everybody groups up into small cities, right?
Yeah, that's true. Make little groups. It's just that Fallout obviously is static. It doesn't play out over time the way in Walking Dead you get to see the progression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that would have been that would have been a really good scene for the road, because in the road I never got the sense that there was order. That the only people who are doing slightly well are large groups of mostly really rough men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that makes sense, because those are the groups that you see doing well, as the people hunting that woman and her child, which I never really understood. That woman and her child actually looked to be dressed modernly. They didn't really look like they were dressed for the apocalypse.
And I think that was actually supposed to be that way. I think they were supposed to be characters who have been hiding this whole time and have just suddenly now have to survive and have no idea how to do it.
Yeah, whereas the man and the boy, they were we don't need anybody. We are just going to be 2 people. Mm-hmm. And that's what they've always been doing. So in the book, after the trees fall down, there's this great scene where they're starving at this point, really badly starving, probably the worst that they're starving.
As the boy says, are we gonna die now?
Yeah, and he says, you think I lie to you about dying? Okay, I might lie to you, but we're not dying.
I just every part of this film is bleak. There is a single. But no, it's not true. There's a couple scenes that have color. Beyond that, everything is dark gray, which I love, because that's how their world was.
Gray and brown.
It's not stylized the way that a lot of shows are. It really looks that way to them.
Mm-hmm.
But even in moments like that, where he's like, "Are we gonna starve?" and he's like, "No, we're not gonna just keel over and die." Starvation takes a long time.
So we're starving.
Oh, no part of this book is just things are going well.
So I want to take you through how many things he actually overlooked with the cannibal scene. Because the cannibal scene was actually done in such a great way in the book. So after the trees fall down and they're starving, they're so desperate they don't even try to hide themselves. They have a fire right next to the road.
Oh, geez.
And so they have this fire right next to the road, and when they wake up, there's wagon tracks in the road. They can see rubber tire marks in the road. Someone went right past them while they were sleeping. So they fucking dip out as fast as they can, and they try to make a crazy looping trail so that if anyone were to try and come and look for them, they couldn't find them. And they see 2 men go up the road the opposite direction trying to find them.
Oh.
When those 2 men go up the road, they go the other way and head towards where the wagon was going. So they come down, they find this house. And at this point, they're still so desperate, like you said, that the man's ignoring everything.
Yeah.
So they enter the house, and there's a rope that leads from the house. It's connected to a bell, and it leads out the window and off into the grass. So it's the first sign that something's wrong.
A bell, sorry?
A bell is connected to a string, and it goes out the window, across the grass.
Weird. And
then out there is a little shed where a lookout will sit, and they'll ring the bell when people come down the road.
I see.
So there's a bunch of bedding in front of the fireplace, meaning someone sleeps there. There's that massive pile of shoes and clothes.
Yeah.
And they spend most of the story looking for shoes. Yet when they see this pile of shoes, they just go, yeah, whatever. It's because they're hungry, right? It's all Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
So there's that. Then there's trampled grass and the smell of excrement, which both indicate people are there,
Yeah.
right? Grass wouldn't be trampled. It would be covered in ash if there was no one there. So then they find the lock trap door and they go out back to try and find something that can pry it open. And they find a cauldron sitting over the remains of a fire. He sees the rubber tire wagon and does not clue in.
Oh.
He sees the wagon sitting there, but it's just his mind is so elsewhere that he doesn't notice.
Oh.
So he grabs a shovel and they go back inside to open the hatch. And that's when they find the people in the basement.
That was basically... Have you ever seen Schindler's List?
No, I've still not seen that.
The entire film is in black and white in a time where color was available to filmmakers. And it's because one little girl's red coat is in color. And Schindler sees that red coat on that girl. And later in the film, you see the red coat in a pile of coats. The entire film had the color changed just so that you notice the one, just so that you notice the implication of what happened there.
Oh, that's so brutal.
And it's sad, but it's like a beautiful scene as well because it's intended to give you that horrible realization that Schindler had.
That's like the Princess and the Pea, right? When everything
because they're able to notice the tiniest thing.
Well, no, I just meant that when something is supposed to be perfectly smooth, you can see that one little imperfection, right? It just pops out at you.
They kind of do that in Walking Dead, but it's like there's no time between it. Rick kills this guy and then like searches him, and the guy's got a tattoo that says something about like I love you, Gracie, or something like that. And then he walks into the next room and there's a baby, and above it says Gracie. Oh. And he just goes and just does that whole Rick thing where he does this
Coral.
No, he does this Rick thing where he kind of like goes to do something and then stops and then goes to do something and stops. It's like his way of like portraying that his character has no idea what to do in this moment.
Scattered.
And he's just like completely heartbroken that he views this man as an enemy because he was. But as soon as he ended him, he realized this man's just like him, also fighting for his life and his child's life. This is just a man on the opposite side of the gun.
Well, that's what I really like about these stories. These stories prove that it is not purely a matter of good and evil. Sometimes it's simply a matter of you or me. Right? That's
that first woman in Walking Dead, the first woman who says she's Negan, and they talk to her about like she tells her experience of the day that the event happened, and how she was stuck on an island with her boss for whatever reason, and she couldn't get back to her daughter, and she never saw her daughter again. Like the whole event happened, and she just never ever got to her daughter. It was a great moment because it like shows you just how every person in that world is living in the same circumstance, and there's only very few people who are actually creating evil moments.
And that's one thing I liked about Snowpiercer, because in Snowpiercer it was a series of people with no choice.
Well, and they also kind of make you feel at the end like the bad guy might be good and that the protagonist may be a bad man. Because he tells you this story about that time that he ate a baby. At the end of the film, though, they wait. They make you think he's this
wonderful paragon,
this great dude who's like risen above everybody else. But he was the same desperate man. And you also find out that what's his name? He played Jackson Pollock. What's his name?
What?
He played Jackson Pollock. Yeah, the train master. Or whatever.
Oh, Ed Helms.
Ed Helms. No.
No.
Ed Helms is a comedic actor.
Ed. Oh,
yes.
No.
It is an Ed. Yes.
It is totally an Ed, though. How can we not get this?
Oh
no, we're sorry, Ed. Yeah, look it up.
But anyway, he seems like this villain, and then and he's got like a child in the engine of the thing, and he's like, the piece for that no longer exists. The train does not work
without that piece,
and nobody fits in that space but a child. So what would you like me to do? Stop the train? Kill everybody?
Kill us all?
Because you don't want one child to work in there? I love this is kind of a common theme of Adiscussions, is that you pick stories where people have impossible decisions. It happens so frequently in these Adiscussions, and then what's his name? I almost call him Hemsworth. Fucking Captain America goes and fucking stops, like tries to save the boy, and kills everybody, including himself and the boy. And then we're supposed to think that this is a positive ending because there's a polar bear. You know what happens? That kid survives. That's right. He's the only two people who are the kid and the older kid. But it's supposed to be a positive ending because you see wildlife. But it's a polar bear. Those kids are dead.
They're dead, but I think it proves that the planet will recover. I think that is supposed to be the upside.
Right.
We know you're all dead, but at least your planet will thrive in your absence. Someone actually asked me how I choose the stories for the Adiscussions, and that was, after a lot of thought, that's what I boiled it down to. I really like characters who are put in a position to make impossible choices.
Yeah.
They have to. So what's his name?
Ed Harris.
He
apparently...
I was so close. Ed H.
When he was part of the filming of The Abyss, directed by James Cameron actually yelled at him so badly that he went to his trailer and cried. Yeah. Apparently working with... There's a lot of directors like that who are so focused on the final product that they have no regard for the people in the middle. They what's his name? James Cameron just looks at it as, if I yell and scream at somebody or push them over the edge, it's to get the final product, and that you should thank me when
it's all over.
When it's all over. Like, he had such a problem with Leonardo DiCaprio had such a problem with Jackson Pollock that he refused to maybe he didn't, but there was a problem between the two of them, and so James Cameron got a giant photograph of himself printed out so that during the spitting scene, Leo could spit at a giant photo of James Cameron's face. He is so willing to get the job done that he will actually put himself in that position.
Whatever it takes.
He told a woman during The Abyss filming to pee in her suit because she wanted a bathroom break. And he's like, I pee all the time in my chair.
In my chair. I have actually heard him say that. That is kind of fucked up. Especially because those director chairs are not intended to hold liquid. So it would go right through it and down.
That's what we have interns for.
James Cameron, you got 3 chairs side by side and one of them has a bucket underneath. So the trees falling over, I find a very interesting scene because earlier in the book, the boy asks him, what happens if the trees fall over? And the man says, don't worry, the trees won't fall on us. And the boy says, but what if they do? And he says, I'm certain that they won't. And then right down the road, they find trees lying over the road, meaning good thing they didn't come while the trees chose to fall. And then later they do.
Sorry, in the film, they show a tree falling behind them and it scares them. And then later on in the film, it makes sense that they fall over on them. I like that because it didn't feel like it came out of nowhere. It felt like they had established that trees fall all the time because they're dead, actually.
And that's why I really liked the movie. Because when I watched The Giver, I spent the whole time infuriated at all the shit they chose to change just for the hell of it.
Mm-hmm.
But man, watching this, I was listening to the lines and I knew how the sentences were going to end because I read them in the book. That is so unheard of. When did they ever do that? That's amazing.
They can't even get the lines right in remakes of video games by the same companies. It's amazing. I guess it's the belief that your creativity is more important than the source material.
And the reason you're making a movie about the road is because it was good. No one says, hey, here's a really shit book. See if you can make it an interesting movie. That's not how it goes.
Well, I get when you want to change something for an audience. I understand that when you're aiming for something different, you don't in Hunger Games, in the first movie, when that one guy who turns, he doesn't really turn on them, but the one guy who corners them near the end of the movie and then gets eaten by dogs. In the book, I've been told that his armor was so thick that they couldn't kill him, and they just kind of ripped him apart for hours. And then the two,
and that wouldn't translate well.
And the two had to sit on top of whatever it is they were sitting on top of, just listening to this guy howling all night. So they had to remove that.
Yeah, that wouldn't
because
translate
the movie
well.
wasn't supposed to be like that fucking hard.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be like a kind of like a fun but fucked up film for families, not like a horrible Tarantino experience.
That is a really good example, and I think this movie has a ton of them too. For example, the little scenes that were easy to do in the book because the book is long were just jammed into other scenes. So, for example, him throwing his wallet out. He does that on the bridge when they encounter that truck, right? That's like jammed into the bridge. Those scenes are totally unrelated in the book, but there's no reason they can't be put together. It doesn't invalidate the bridge story to have him throw out his wallet. So they did a lot of that stuff. They said, hey, these are important things we want to get in, but we can't make them their own scenes because it'll be an 8-hour movie. That, I totally agree with you. There's room for that. You just can't say, I don't know, 50 kids doesn't sound like enough. Let's say it's 100. And I don't know, 18's not a good number. Let's make it 53. Just don't do shit like that. And you can't be like, well, you know, I know he lived behind the house of the old, but wouldn't it be cooler if he lived on his own? No, it wouldn't. Wouldn't it be cooler if there was a motorcycle scene? No, it wouldn't. It just wouldn't. That's all I'm saying, all right?
Yeah.
So they follow this forest fire in the story, and it's really creepy because they actually have to stop because the road becomes soft from the fire, and their feet start getting stuck into it. So they have to wait until the road hardens back before they can continue with their journey. And then when they're going, they find this dude who is struck by lightning.
Wow.
And he's basically just working off lizard brain. He's just kind of limping down the road, and then when they get there, he just like sits down. He doesn't say any words. He's shaking, like having seizures almost.
Jeez.
And the man somehow knows that he got struck by lightning, which you guys just walked through a forest fire, so he doesn't necessarily have to be lightning, but whatever. And he just says, yeah, there's nothing we can do for him. And they just walk right by him. There's like nothing else to be done. It's like the old man Eli. Like you can't take him on because he might get you killed.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the sad thing. How much can you really help other people?
The funny thing, back to our theory about how the end of the film is a dream.
Yeah.
He keeps saying we have to follow the road. He never explains why. They just keep saying, just keep going south, get to the coast. They have no reason to believe.
There's no destination.
There's no reason to believe that. It's because I think he gave the child an objective to keep them focused on something, because otherwise because the reality of their world is that it's just moving from the next place, hoping that you don't encounter people, hoping that you find shit. And then at the end of the book, the fucking guy who's like, look, kid, you have two options. You can come with us or you can go on your own. Either way, avoid the road, the thing that they've been following the whole time.
Yep.
It's almost like the dad like finally realized in his last moments that maybe following this high traffic area was a bit of an issue, and that maybe he wanted it to end. Maybe he knew that there was a higher chance of survival by getting off the road, and that he wanted to choose to give the child and himself an objective on a short life than to go off in a different direction and live longer and suffer longer. Maybe his whole plan was for them to both die naturally and not have to do it himself.
Interesting, because otherwise he might have had to.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or by putting himself in that situation where they might get captured, he has a good reason to kill them both and end it all.
If he needs to. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, and that's the first thing the guy does say is like, you have to avoid the road. And it makes sense because it's what brings them the most of their food, right? Following the road. Like, I see why there are advantages to it, but it's true. All of the trouble they get in is because of that.
Yep.
And it's weird to start to think about how they're using this road that used to be for cars. And so you'd think, oh, well, why do you need a road anymore? But it's still a lot easier to walk on asphalt than it is to walk through a forest, especially, well, he has a cart. Because they don't have a cart for that much of the actual movie, but in the books they have the cart the whole time.
I love it when he yells at the kid. There's like a weird thing that Viggo does with his voice, and it feels so real. Like he's just so actually pissed right now. He's like, "Help me with the cart!" Like,
dude, Viggo's the best.
Or like, "Where you doing? Where you going?" Like the way he says it is so weird. It's like off character almost. Like it feels like the character is actually like on the edge. Like he can't like hold it in. He can't be stoic anymore. He has to just like scream at this child, like, "Where are you going?"
As far as I'm concerned, they were cast perfectly, both of them.
Oh yeah,
perfectly. No offense, but you haven't read the book.
I mean,
they're cast well for the movie.
That's the thing, though. Like, casting is a really important thing, and it's something that I'm noticing a lot in film, like, or in television, and it's all about like the network that you see it on. Like a show that has so much money behind it, like Blacklist. Every single character is perfectly cast. Like
Liz.
What?
I said Liz.
Oh, no, Liz is poorly written. She's
well cast.
She's well cast.
No, that's true. She's very poorly written.
Well, she's also very annoying, and I think something happened in this 4th season. I think she had like a cold because her voice changes suddenly. It goes like nasally for like several episodes and then goes back to normal. Anyway, in Walking Dead and The 100, there's these characters, these actors just don't fit the character at all. Especially Walking Dead, they just throw people in there to die, and you're supposed to care about them. Like it's like Karen is the best one. I think it's her name. Season 3. She's supposed to be a character that you care about because she's the only one that survives the governor. When he goes nuts and just kills everybody, she's the one who survives and goes and tells everybody what happened. Karen. But she has no character design. She has nothing in the story for you to care about her except Andrea mentions Karen twice. That's it. They were just like, shit, Karen has no story. We need Karen to be there.
So Andrea's got to mention her.
Andrea's like saying something, and she's like, "Karen, how about you?" And it was like, and then there's like another scene where she's like, "Hey, Karen, could you wait?" And I'm like, "Am I supposed to know Karen?"
Just to write her right in, yeah.
But this story, the road is so well done. The actor who plays Eli, the boy, the man, the family at the end, the thief is so good. All of the characters who play the cannibals are amazing. Every character in this story is extraordinarily well written.
The truck driver, the guy who takes a piss.
Where have I seen him? He is so good every time I see him.
Yeah, he's been in a few things.
But even the woman at the end, who's part of the family, did you recognize her? Because she's actually killing it now. She's pretty popular.
Yeah, what else has she been in?
She was in.
I feel like she was in a Black Mirror episode.
She was in House of Cards. She was probably in Black Mirror. She's also in the new Lost in Space TV show.
Oh.
Yeah, she's doing quite well.
Interesting. And I recognize the man from the end.
Yes.
The man with the shotgun.
I think I know him. He's just so heavily like make-upped, and his teeth are all weird, and
they did a great job with that too, so, making everyone look like they came.
I know him.
I couldn't believe how well they did with the set pieces and the props.
Mm-hmm.
The clothing that the thief is wearing is so fucking well done. It looks so accurate.
He's got like cardboard shoes.
Yeah, and it's in there. You could see pieces of tape and plastic, and like you could tell they're ratty. It was almost like the people who made the props actually lived in it for like a month just to wear it in and make it look real. It was impressive.
That is something that like they'll do, which is like actually stomp on shit. Just like whack it on the ground.
Beat it up, yeah.
Just like throw it around and shit.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
The boy goes through a lot of changes throughout the story, and a lot of it is him trying to sort of take on responsibility. But one thing that he says is, I don't know what we're doing. Like he doesn't know why they're doing it. He doesn't know what their motivation is.
Oh.
Because what's the long-term goal? Like you said, go south, hit the coast. And then they hit the coast.
I have no idea how prop designers make stuff.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's a theory that they smash things on the ground, I should say. I don't actually know how that works.
Well, if you're trying to rough something up, I'm sure there's a certain amount you can do with paint and lighting and whatever. But at the end of the day, if you want something to look like it lasted through an apocalypse, I wouldn't doubt it if they take dirt and rub it into it. Like if you want it to look dirty, how else do you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just, nothing about it seemed out of place. Nothing about it seemed like, bullshit.
Well, what I love about this film is that it didn't feel like they tackled any scene they couldn't accomplish. There's no weird CGI thing that pops out. There's no awkward, weirdly edited scenes, with the exception of the boat scene, which was kind of awkward. But beyond that, every scene felt like it was something that they knew they could accomplish, and then they did it really well, which is maybe why they left out the army scene. Maybe that would have been like way too far beyond like the budget, or maybe it
would have been the people. Because the way I picture the army, there would be at least 100 people.
that's what it was. Yeah.
Right? Because it would be clubmen and spearmen and slaves and like.
Because there were scenes where I was pretty sure they were CGI. Like, I'm pretty sure the trees falling was not practical effects.
Yeah.
It could have been, but there's a GoPro shot on a falling tree, and it just feels like it could have been real, but the coordination required to find dead trees and then to get them to fall the way you want them.
Yeah.
I mean, it could have happened, but like back then, computers are really good with like static textures, like trees and walls and skies and stuff. So I have a feeling a lot of it was done that way, but I'm not 100%. It could have been real. They could have actually gone to a dead forest and just like tipped shit over.
Maybe. Dangerous as fuck.
Yeah, it would have been. But I mean, if you have like a proper arborist there
for the practical effects,
tree wrangler.
Yeah, they did really well. Quite honestly, the little things are obviously always going to be missing. The book, I would say, is definitely still very much worth the read. Because one thing that was super creepy about the guys with the truck is, so they come out of nowhere, and the truck just happens to break down next to where they're hiding.
Right.
Which is creepy in the first place. They shoot that guy and run away. And then when they're hiding in the grass, this they did in the story, the men who come and look for them make no sounds. They don't call out to each other. They don't call out to the people they're looking for. All they can hear is footsteps. Imagine how fucking creepy that is.
That is creepy.
You can't tell how far away they are because the footsteps basically always sound the same. So they're lying there in the grass hoping that these guys don't notice where they are. And that I found was more sinister than anything.
Yeah.
Then they loop back to where the truck was, where their cart was. Their cart's empty, and they find a pile of the dead guy's innards, and they find his boiled bones sitting next to them. So those dudes just ate their buddy.
Oh, I thought there was significance of like the entrails there.
Yeah, that's their buddy.
Him.
Yep.
Wow.
And you know, when he was like, "Are you a doctor? We need a doctor." They were gonna eat them. They don't need a doctor.
Oh, they would have.
No one needs a doctor.
Yeah.
The thing I really liked about the overall story is that where the man is super smart. Like he says all these things.
He knows a lot.
Yeah, that show that he's really knowledgeable, and yet the boy knows fucking nothing. I know he's 10. But
yeah,
it was a really good example of how quickly knowledge disappears in a catastrophe.
And I love how the kid is very limited with his speech. He doesn't talk very often, and when he does, it's very to the point. And he'll just say like really basic words without like all the middle words. He doesn't use unnecessary language because the only language he's learned from is from a mature human being. He said no other people to gather weird words like when you don't need it.
Well, they also don't have energy to speak all the time, right? They can't just spend hours talking. That's why when he's talking to the guy at the end, the guy's a little confused. And that's why he even says, "You're pretty weirded out, aren't you?" Because he's never met anyone else. Never, ever met another person.
And that guy that approaches him at the end on the beach really looks like a bad guy. He's got a shotgun, and he's saying nothing. He's just walking towards this kid. It looks like he should just shoot him.
I would like to say that the guy is more intimidating in the movie, but I think it's just because you can see him, and it's scarier because you can see him. Because in the book, he seems less intimidating, but it's I think only because you can't actually see what he looks like, and when you see him and you're like, oh shit, like he's this dirty looking dude, he looks like every other person, and the things he's saying are not very reassuring. You know, how can I trust you? You can't.
Well, he's like you got two options, kid. Or like,
yeah, you can come with me or like go die, pretty much.
He's like, why don't you put that gun away? Like everything he says sounds like, you know, and so far you've basically only met people who are trying to kill them, and so suddenly this guy who isn't trying to kill them seems like that. And I keep making this comparison because I think that similar stories are important here. But The Walking Dead does it beautifully. In season 5, they meet probably the worst group they've ever seen. The people who are trying to bureaucratically murder them and eat them like cattle. Like it's like an assembly line style of like I don't even know how to describe it, but they escape Terminus, and the first guy they meet is actually one of the nicest people in the whole story. I forget his name, but he shows up and he's like, I'm unarmed, I want you to be part. He's like, I'm just here to talk. I just want to, I want to bring you to a place that's
right.
like untouched by the apocalypse. Like everything he says seems like he's a bad guy, and they play with your
forgot about him.
with your imagination because they've just shown you the worst of humanity. I mean, season 3 is a whole fight against people. Season 4 is about their place being destroyed by other people, and then season 5 they get almost fucking eaten with these baseball bat murderers. And then this guy who shows up who's like super suave and charismatic is like, hey, look, I'm not trying to hurt you. Look, I got photographs of this place. It's beautiful. Nobody's there. None of it should register in someone's brain as being a good idea to trust this guy. And they feel the same way. And in my head, I was like, shoot this motherfucker. What are you doing?
And yet,
you almost got fucking eaten like half an hour ago. Don't trust this guy. And he ends up being the nicest character in the show. And that they did that on purpose. They wanted you to feel like the characters, which is what they did in this book.
Yeah.
They throw constant bad people at them, even the ones who don't want to be bad. The thief who steals their shit because he's just starving too. The bow and arrow guy who like gets them in the leg with it because they think they're being followed. Every character doesn't want to be doing what they're doing, but they're doing it to survive, and you get into the mood of the characters that everyone is trying to kill them, and suddenly there's this guy at the very end of the book who's not trying to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
And that moment when he's like walking at him was like genuinely scary for me the first time I watched it.
I really like the guy, the thief, because they get their comeuppance against the thief, but they don't feel good about it.
Yeah.
And what even happens, I really like when they're down the road, and I don't remember if this was in the actual movie, but the man says, I wasn't going to kill him.
Yeah.
And then the boy says, but we did kill him.
Right.
And I like that because in Terminus, in The Walking Dead, you feel so good when they murder those people.
Yep.
You're like fist pumping in your chair, and you're like, murder more, murder more. But this one doesn't feel like that.
Yeah.
It feels like, wow, it felt good at the time, but all of this pleasure's been sucked out of it.
And the trouble with Terminus is that they were supposed to spend more time with that because they're supposed to be like, they do a little bit of the background where they explain that they used to be an actual sanctuary, and then bad people showed up, took over, and became like the butcher essentially, and they changed their mentality on this new world where you're either the butcher or the cattle. They didn't spend enough time for us to feel bad for them at the end, though. Mm-hmm. Mostly because they set it up in like a bureaucratic way where it's like these dudes are bashing skulls and slitting throats into like troughs. Sorry. And the guy comes in with a clipboard and he's like, how many shots did you fire? He's like, 13. It's like they're over these bodies of people who are about to be like murdered, and they're speaking like all of this is just day-to-day stuff. And that bureaucracy actually takes all of the, it takes the satisfaction out of that moment. You don't really feel like they're desperate people trying to...
No, they feel like assholes.
Well, yeah, and then they walk into that one room, and it's like skinned, like parts of bodies that are like hanging on meat hooks. And Rick's like, kill any one of these people you see or something like that. He's like, don't even hesitate to kill these people, because you see that not only are do they have this like very government style setup where like there's like a disconnection between what they're actually doing, they're also like really efficiently taking apart bodies to eat them. Like there's no redeemable feature of these people because there's been so much time.
Yeah, they're not doing what they have to. They're doing what they feel like they want to now.
Well, they've justified their actions by saying it's us or them, but in such an extreme format, and you can feel bad in some scenarios. Sometimes in The Walking Dead, they like kill people before they realize who they are, and then they realize like, oh shit, these are just people on the opposite side. But like Terminus is like so much catharsis to them actually like escaping and killing people.
In the story, the man does a lot of describing things in order to like normalize them for himself. Like after he shoots the trucker guy, he's washing the boy's hair, and he says, "This is my job. I wash a man's brains out of my child's hair." Like he's trying to get over how fucked up it is
Yeah.
by normalizing it, by saying it to himself. You know, this is what I do. I wash a man's brains from my kid's hair. Like, that's
The kid
dark.
is like squirming in the movie when he's doing that. What's
It's
that
because
about?
it's freezing cold.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's
Oh,
frigid
okay.
in that water. They go swimming a few times and it never seems fun.
No, it seems
Every
No,
time-
that's not true. They're really excited in the beginning of the film. They find that like there's a little pool of water under
a waterfall?
under a cave, and he jumps in there and he's actually like splashing, and the kid's like, ha ha.
That's right.
There's like
It
one
just-
moment.
I think it's that they describe how cold it is, and I just hate being cold. So when I'm
Yes.
reading those scenes, I'm like, oh, don't. It's like the fires. They're always talking about making these fires with this old ass dead wet wood, and I'm just thinking back to the fires we do in our backyard, and I'm
Mhm.
thinking, how the fuck do you make wet wood burn all night? Like, what the fuck? They never have a problem
Dry
making
it
a
out.
fire in an apocalypse. It makes no sense to me. It's like the man went and dragged a bunch of logs onto the fire. With what energy? He just is not eating. How is he dragging all this wood around?
Well, part of also what I like about this is that the focus on food is so great, in that they very rarely focus on that in other apocalypse films. It's like it's usually there.
I even talked about that in Shrek, about how they don't eat.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh right, because they were on a long journey.
Yeah.
You know, like in Walking Dead, they occasionally bring it up. They have like, you know, at the beginning of season 3, they're like, God, I can't find food. And then like season 4, he's like, Rick's like, I want to grow the food.
But mostly it's about violence and zombies.
And then Morgan's like, he's like, it always comes down to food. And then even when you have the food, you got to make sure nobody takes your shit. That's how it works. So, like, but beyond those few moments, it's like food is not really the issue. You even see in the background sometimes like there's like a toilet in the prison, and it's like there's like they just don't talk about the like the mundane realities of that world, of like the lack of showering and all that shit.
Well, the food that they eat is shit too.
Oh yeah.
So there's one point where they find some wheat seeds and they're eating those because like they found them on the ground in a barn. They find some like a small handful of a couple of wheat seeds, and they're like sharing them. Like, here, you have a seed, I'll have a seed. Like, that's their food. They find cornmeal and they sift it because there's rat shit in it.
Oh,
so they sift the rat shit out of the cornmeal so that they can make themselves some patties. So just the food that they eat, and then they have the can of Coke. The kid has a can of Coke.
Yes.
Which was probably my favorite scene in the whole story.
It's a beautiful scene.
It's a beautiful scene because it really brings together old world and new world.
Well, the kid is like, ooh. Like,
What is this
He's like,
thing?
this is weird. And the dad takes a sip and he like closes his eyes, and it's like it brings him back to the old world.
The look on his face.
And I love that.
Yeah.
Same thing happens when he's like, I love the scene when they're in the bunker and they've cut their hair, and Vigo looks like he does on the front of the book, because he looks very weird at the beginning of the film, and he actually looks like really good later on when he like properly trims his beard. And then they cut their hair and clean themselves, and he's wearing a suit while they're sitting at like a candlelight dinner, and he's drinking whiskey or something like that.
Yeah.
And I love that moment because it's like it's contrast. And I also have another scene like that. I don't know why this is connected, but like on the topic of like catharsis, I guess, or the moment where they find all the food. It's like an amazing moment because you spent the whole film watching them carefully move, covered in dirt. They're tired, they're hungry, they're cold, and suddenly all of those things are gone. They're not cold. They're wearing t-shirts. In the like the one kid has like his like tank top on.
Yeah, it's true.
They're clean. They're eating way more than they should. They're drinking constantly. They're not even thinking about. They're wasting it now, right? In the Pacific, they spend so much time in these mountains in just fighting, and they come back from fighting and they are like tattered. All of their shit is like falling off. Dudes are like missing parts of their shirts and shit like that, and the their whatever commanding officer Akak, he's like grab some chow, we reconvene at 0900 or whatever, and they're all just like, what? One guy's like, Akak just gave us the morning off, and they like throw their helmets off, drop their shit, and run for the food, and then they're just hanging out. And when you watch it like all together, the way that I did, without like an episode a week or whatever, when you watch it all together, you feel an actual sense of relief because they spend weeks
fighting.
Like they spend weeks where they are sitting in holes waiting to be shot at, and then go back to sitting in holes. They dig a hole to sleep in, find a body in it, and then have to sit there because all of the holes have to be spaced out. Oh. They are in these horrible conditions. So to them, 2 hours off is like a vacation. It's like the sense of relief that you get when these characters finally realize they have just 2 hours.
Well, and that's actually, when you think about it, that's a very valid comparison because these characters get 2 or 3 days off out of like years worth of struggle.
Yeah.
It's the same idea, right? These guys get a couple of hours out of months worth of struggle.
Right before they find the bunker, there's a moment where Vigo finds a piano, and it reminds him that his wife used to play piano, and at the same time he's dealing with his cough and the fact that they don't have any food. And all of those things come together, and he's trying to cry quietly so that the son doesn't hear it. And it's such a beautiful moment when they find this thing. He gets so excited. The son doesn't even want him to go down into the bunker.
I like that. I really
He's scared.
Yeah, because there's these 2 identical entrances with different things on the other side, right?
What was the other?
The other hatch they go down is the one with the naked people in it that were going to be eaten by the cannibals.
Right, the last time they went underground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for the boy, it's just a hatch. But it shows that there is nothing wrong with a gateway. It's about what's on the other side of that gateway.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really cool example of how you need to try not to let triggers get in the way of the reward.
It's like when people get upset about like technology becoming better and better at like surveying people. And it's like, yeah, it's also better at surveying the people who survey people. The technology is not the issue. Back when we only had arrows, that was probably a scary idea. Imagine when arrows first came about. There was never anything flying through the air, and now there is. But you can also fire arrows through the air.
Gunpowder?
Oh, gunpowder would have been a scary,
revolutionary. Hundreds of years of silent projectiles,
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, someone walks onto the battlefield and kaboom! Someone dies.
Well, and
that would change everything.
Arrows were a very specific weapon. Like, you hit somebody in the chest and it might not kill them. But a bullet to the chest in a time without proper medicine was a death sentence. Whereas an arrow you might be all right, depending on the distance and how well someone fired it.
You'd be surprised, actually.
No, they're still very effective weapons.
Yeah.
But, like, a bullet through your stomach versus an arrow in your stomach could actually, like, there's a difference, and the bullet getting stuck is so much harder to get out than an arrow.
The arrow will cause more damage, but the bullet is this tiny thing that will fragment when it hits bone. Well, that's part of what's really fucked up about bullets.
It also poisons you.
Yeah, because it's lead. Yeah. There's a lot of things that really changed when that happened.
But it's like, this thing can go through doors, and it's like, yeah, but then we're just gonna figure out a better way to make doors. Like, this thing can pick locks when we just make better locks.
It's a constant arms race.
It is.
Yeah.
Attack defense is actually like a constant circle.
Yeah. Well, then they always say attack always wins. You can never defend something infinitely. There will always be a new type of attack that will defeat that defense. You know, you can create a bunker, someone can create a bigger bomb.
Right.
You can create a harder door, someone will go through the wall. Right? The door is hardened, but the wall beside it is just made out of regular concrete. So you can go right through that wall, and it's actually easier than going through the door.
Yeah.
And that's actually an evolutionary idea too, that creatures evolve defense mechanisms against predators. The predators only get better at killing the things around their defense mechanisms.
It's more so the ones who effectively got past those defenses survived and passed on the traits.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
I always thought of evolution as something that happened within a lifetime. It's actually something that happens over several generations.
Yeah.
Where, like, polar bears were very likely actually darkly colored, and one came out with a slight mutation that caused its fur to become white, and it survived way longer than any other polar bear in a white desert. and it passed on its genes to the point where they're all white now. And then there's probably going to be a mutation of polar bears where one comes out brown and doesn't survive very long because it's impossible.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is that we say it's multiple generations, which makes you think, oh, hundreds or thousands of years. But with insects, those generations happen so much quicker.
Well, they say actually the place where you can find the most new species of insects is in your own backyard because they evolve so quickly. Because their generations are sometimes a week.
Well, and not only that, insects actually have smaller insects living on them.
Really?
Yes.
Whoa.
Which is what's really crazy. Because, you think about there's bacteria on your skin and, maybe like your cat or dog has like lice or fleas in its hair. Well, yeah, a little insect will have even smaller insects living on it.
And those insects have even smaller insects.
Maybe, depending on how big they are.
If only I had a tinier vacuum to clean this tiny vacuum.
But in London, there was these moths that would sit on the sides of the trees because the trees were all this sort of whitish color, like the trees in Game of Thrones, the northern trees, and all the moths were white. Then the Industrial Revolution starts, and suddenly these trees are being covered in soot, which makes them black. So suddenly all the white moths are really obvious and get massacred.
Yep.
And in the wake of that, all the moths that were black instead survive. So now it's almost impossible to find those white moths anymore until they stopped producing all the soot.
Yeah.
When they made all these new environmental regulations, suddenly all the black moths started getting massacred because they could be seen on the trees and the white ones came back. So it's crazy how the environment is the only thing that matters.
Well, it's funny.
It drives everything.
We view the animals that survive in weird conditions as pests animals. Squirrels, chipmunks, seagulls, like
squirrels are such pests.
Rats. They're all animals that have survived in the strangest conditions.
Coyotes.
Seagulls live in a concrete jungle. And it's their home. They make nests and live and eat and survive. Like I saw the other day. It was a rainy morning, and on a grassy field, I saw all of these seagulls just walking around and just like pecking. And it was like a kind of a peaceful moment. And then I realized how terrifying that would be on the ground. It is basically the tripods from World of Worlds just crawling around, grabbing people up. That's what they're doing.
Boom.
They're just like big, like, just like fucking dinosaurs walking around snatching worms and bugs out of the grass. It's like, it's a terrifying environment. It's like if a Tyrannosaurus was, it's like if you lived in tall grass and there was nothing but Tyrannosaurus walking around taller than the tall grass, just eating shit.
Yeah, and if there was a Tyrannosaurus that was a few hundred feet from you, it could just fly into the air.
Basically a dragon.
A dragon. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So after they survive the cannibal house, they were starving when they went in, and they're still starving now because they didn't get anything from it. And so he leaves the boy and he goes to investigate this one house and finds a cistern, if you know what that is. It's a holding tank for water.
Okay.
And so it fills with rainwater from the eaves trough. And he gets this fresh water, which has been untouched essentially by the ash of the environment. And when he tastes it, he says nothing in his memory was of anything so good. That fresh water was better than anything he'd tasted in years. And he also finds like these old brown tasteless apples, that's how he describes them. But they're still apples. So nonetheless, still food. And at this point, he describes the earth by a very unusual word. Cormac McCarthy uses a lot of unusual words. But he calls the world an intestate world, which means a world having no will. So he's saying that the world went to shit without any sort of a way to decide who would take it over.
Oh, okay.
And that's what is going on now, is everybody is vying to see who will be the one to take it over.
I really like the line, whoever created humanity will find no humanity here. Or whoever made man will find no humanity here anymore, or something like that. It talks about God and whether he exists and what type of person he is. And then I'm pretty sure the man says something about, hey, if he could really make the world, he would make it so. Like, he would make it the same way.
Way it was, yeah, which is fucking stupid.
I don't really get what he means. Like, I guess he's just, like, accepted the world and doesn't want to change it.
I think what he's really saying is if he could go back and agree with his wife and kill themselves, he would still choose to live. Still choose to bring the boy and do what he had to do. I think he meant he wouldn't change his actions.
Yeah, it's funny, they say that the meek will inherit the earth, and it's exactly the opposite. The meek are actually like preyed upon in this.
Well, what they really mean, I think, when they say the meek will inherit the earth, when you look at a catastrophe like this, or even imagine a catastrophe that's not nuclear in nature, because the problem with this catastrophe is that you can't grow food. That's like the really number one thing, is that in this world, the animals are dead, the plants are dead. The only thing that lives is humans, because they have ways to shelter themselves.
Right.
Let's say instead it was some sort of super solar flare that wiped out all technology. People who lived in the cities would be the first to die, because suddenly society would fall apart.
Right.
There'd be no food, there'd be whatever. But the people who are living in a jungle in Brazil wouldn't even notice. They are who we consider to be the meek, because they have nothing. They don't have any power. But
I always thought meek was like a weakness thing.
Yeah, it is. It is. And they are the weak people, because even someone who lives in like a developing country, at least that developing country, they have military power. They have all these other things. The
way that I always interpreted it was that the meek were the people who didn't go to war. Was the idea. It was like the strong men would go out, fight, and die, and the meek stayed at home and inherited the remaining of the world, because all the people killed each other.
The reality is that that's actually not about people, that expression. The expression, the meek will inherit the earth, is because every time there's a major disaster, the large creatures die because they need so much more food.
I was going to mention that like the small rodents survived the dinosaur ending environment because they were so tiny. And
they didn't need as much.
They required very small food, and there was now like very little shelter, and that they could actually utilize.
And what happens is the predators go away all of a sudden, right? So now the, what did they say? The largest creature that generally survives an apocalypse is about 25 kilograms, which is like 50 to 60 pounds. So humans are clearly way above that.
Unless you're in the ocean. In which case, yes, bigger animals are going to die, but they're still sharks. One of the oldest things on the planet. They're like 150 million years old.
Yeah, sharks are terrifying, man.
And they have they're as far as they're like, they haven't changed a lot.
So the sharks, you said what, 400 million? Yeah, I think that's correct.
They're definitely older than alligators, and alligators are like 100 something, right?
Yeah, alligators are 250.
Really?
Yeah. So sharks came about 400 million years ago, and at about 250 million years ago is the greatest mass extinction of all time. Wiped out 95% of all species that existed at the time.
Wow.
95% of species. And the shark somehow managed to survive through that and thrive into following generations. It's because sharks are basically bears of the sea. Right? They're uber predators.
Oh yeah. The amount the distance that they travel in one day is staggering. They're constantly moving, and they're very fast.
One thing that was kind of crazy is I heard a story where this orca massacred this great white shark, and not long after that, almost immediately, a tagged great white shark dove down to like 1,000 feet depth and traveled 500 kilometers away. Whoa. From where that happened. So it knew that this other shark got eaten by an orca.
Whoa.
And it went, fuck that. I'm getting out of here. I'm going to go eat somewhere else.
Yeah.
How nuts is that?
Well, have you ever watched, do you watch Planet Earth 2?
No, I dabbled, but I didn't.
It's really good. And what I like about it, The Hunt also has David Attenborough. The Hunt is a really great documentary, because it makes you kind of feel for both sides of the predator and the prey. Because if the predator doesn't catch anything, it dies too. So it's like one of them has to die. And so it's a very interesting thing, because you don't really know how you want to feel about it. And polar bears, the crazy thing is, like, with all of the predators, they gave you the statistics on how many hunts fail. And in some cases, it's like 1 in 20 is a successful hunt. Yeah, and polar bears, I forget what it is, but like they fail like 9 times out of 10, maybe even more than that. in some cases, like cheetahs also fail like huge amounts of times.
Yeah, because all they show you on most of the time is them successfully catching prey, so you don't really think about it.
Cheetahs are interesting because they actually don't go faster than they have to. They know how fast something is going, and they gauge their own speed to be just fast enough. Because energy,
don't waste energy.
Energy is the greatest resource in a place like what is that called? Sahara?
Or sorry, no, Savannah. Sahara's a desert.
And polar bears have to deal with that too. They basically can't get a seal once it gets in the water. That's basically home free. But the seals stay out of the water because the most dangerous things for them is the orcas. So they want to be out on top of the water where the polar bears are because they're a less threat and they're easier to get away from. And it's really fucking hard for a polar bear to get a seal because it has to quietly approach on constantly moving ground. And it gets to a certain point during the summer where they basically can't hunt at all because there's not enough space. There's not enough land for them to move.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that's crazy about a polar bear is you assume that, once it gets to the water, that's it. But polar bears actually can swim really fast.
In short bursts, I've seen them, like, there is in the hunt, he actually does get one, but just as it gets in the water.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't just roll into the water and be like, haha, now I'm safe. No, you still have to get away from that motherfucker. He will find you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The old man Eli said something that I felt summed up the book better than any other line. He said, nobody wants to be here and nobody wants to leave.
Everyone's surviving because it's habit.
Yeah, habit. That's a really good way to put it.
He says it in Game of Thrones when Arya and the Hound. I was just trying to remember his
Sandor.
Sandor, yeah, Sandor.
Sandoff.
They find this man who's been like destroyed by, I think, the mountain or something like that, and he's just sitting there bleeding to death, and he's like, just dying. And she's like,
oh yeah, that guy.
She's like, why don't you just die? And he's like, habit.
Yeah, dude, that's a great scene.
Yeah,
that is a great scene. There's the soberness of him realizing he's gonna die, and what does he ask for?
Water, I think.
Do you have any water? Got wine. Or was it the other way around? He asked for wine and he's like, we got water. And he's like, nah, fuck it.
Yes. Yes, because it's like, the funny part about that is that like that's how the Hound is. The Hound, when he comes back from the Blackwater fight, he's like, water, sir? And he's like, fuck water, give me wine.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's what it was like back in the day, right? That's really how everyone was. Is wine was water in a lot of ways, especially because you could drink water and then shit for 4 days.
Oh shit!
If it was bad water.
Oh no!
But you drink wine and it's fine because it's been fermented, so it's right. So that's why they carried wine. It didn't go bad the same way water did, and you didn't have to search for fresh water as much.
Oh jeez.
Yeah, and so that's why everyone back in the day was just a crazy alcoholic. I just love that one scene from Spartacus where he buys women and wine for all the men, and the next morning Naeus just stumbles out of his cell. He's like, I shit myself. Which is something I've, in the modern era, have never heard someone do from drunkenness.
No.
Throwing up. I've heard lots of other things, but I've never heard that one. Oh man. One of my favorite scenes they didn't put in was they're crossing this field to get to this farmhouse, and while they're crossing the field, he finds his old arrowhead because it's been exposed. Did that happen in the movie?
He finds it somewhere. I think it was in the boys' things. I love this scene too. When they're in the bunker, he goes through his son's pockets and he takes everything out and he lays it out real nicely. And it's like keys and like I don't know, it's like a figurine or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure that's where the arrowhead is. I can't remember because I know there's an arrowhead somewhere in the book or in the movie. But he goes to bed and he has this dream about his wife, and so the kid wakes him up and he's like, "Whoa, what's happening?" And the kid's like, "Hey, don't touch my stuff." He woke him up to tell him not to touch his stuff, and I fucking love that.
I do remember that now. I couldn't make myself rewatch the movie, so we had planned to do this last week, and I'd watched the movie right beforehand, and I was gonna watch it again, but like you said, it's It's hard.
I pushed myself.
It is hard.
At the end of it, I actually I had not planned on playing Siege with Jacob, and then I finished it, and I'm like, I need something positive,
something enjoyable.
I need like another person in my life right now, and so I'm like, yo, Siege. And he's like, yeah, dude. And then we had a great night, and then I totally forgot about my bad mood.
Good. Well, there was actually things that were done in the movie that I felt were done better than the book, which is something that blew my mind.
There's certain things, like most of the time, it's hard to get an audience to really read into all of the little details the way that you and I notice things, like the cardboard shoes and the tape on stuff. Like, most people don't care. In a book, you describe it and you make them focus on what's there. So in some cases, books and movies do things better because of their medium, right?
It was just little things like the piano scene that wasn't actually in the book.
Oh.
But I felt like it was a really powerful scene, and I felt like it still portrayed the same idea the book was going for. There was a lot of little things like that. I would say anyone who's not willing to read the book should absolutely watch the movie if they're interested, because as far as I'm concerned, it's the same story, which I've never said. We've done like 18 of these things.
The thing
and they haven't all been books, but still, this is the first one that did it right.
The apocalypse story always has a plot. This movie doesn't have a plot. It's just a series of things that happen. There's no real goal.
Yeah. Doesn't have a through line.
Right. Yeah. There's not really much of an arc either. Beyond the, him seeing the kid and the dog and then finding the dog and the kid at the end. There's really no connection to all the things beyond the road being the connection between all the things.
So the scene where he discovers the arrowhead there's all these things in the scene, and it's also late in the book, and it shows the progression of the boy more than anything. So they're crossing the field. The man finds an arrowhead, and he finds a bunch of like old coins, and then he looks up, and the boy is way ahead of him. The boy has like already moved on, and he looks around, and he sees all the dead trees and the shitty sky, and then he looks back down at the things in his hand, and he just drops them and walks on. Because what is the point in looking at these cool old coins if you die because you didn't get any food? Right. So he realizes that he sort of got caught up in the excitement.
There's a really cool scene that I like where they're going through, I think it's like a mall or something in the movie, and he steps over jewels and money. He just like steps right over top of it because it doesn't matter anymore. And I love that. That was a really great visual storytelling moment where there is no currency. There's no bottle cap currency or anything.
No, the currency is food.
Food is the currency.
That's it. Yeah. And so when they do cross this field, there was all these descriptions that I really liked. He said they walked around the house because they're searching this house. He says they walked around the house like skeptical homebuyers. Looking up and around and seeing like what works and what doesn't.
I think I know what you mean.
And then he says later they were sitting at the table, and he says the gun was placed as if it were another dining implement. Right? Like sitting at the table, they've got all their utensils laid out, and the gun's right there, like it's like it's something used for the meal. And I just felt like it was cool the way they were trying to integrate the way life could have been with the way life is. And they found okra, which is a type of vegetable. And I read orca, and I thought, that's really fucked up. I didn't know you could preserve orca in mason jars. And it took me so long to figure it out.
There's a really cool shot, and I wish there were more of these shots in the film. The cinematography is excellent. But there's this shot that shows a big city, and it's just like on fire, basically. And there's these two giant barges on land, and I love that shot, but it doesn't sit on it long enough for you to fully like see everything in that moment. And I wish there were more shots like that. The movie ends up being mostly forest, mostly dead forest. There's not a lot of scenery beyond that.
And that's probably partly by choice, because they do have a map, and they use it to choose which roads they take. So they're trying to take roads. He says that they use states roads, which means that it's in the United States.
Oh, we definitely know where it's in, because he shows the map he's near like he's near like New York or something.
What I thought was kind of interesting is, so they in the movie thought they were going southeast. I thought they were going southwest, but then I thought about it, and southeast makes a hell of a lot more sense because they go over a mountain pass, And the mountain pass is only about 5,000 feet elevation. They say it in the book. That's a really low mountain. If you were in the West trying to go over the Rockies, it would be like 10,000 feet.
Okay.
Maybe not quite that high, but it would be like more like 6,000 or 8,000 feet. And you wouldn't be able to walk up to it. It would be much more aggressive. Whereas on the East Coast, you have the Appalachian Mountains, which are a lot smoother. So I think they were probably right that it was the Southeast United States. When they do get to the coast, one of my favorite descriptions in the whole book, do you know what an isocline is?
No.
So an isocline is one of those lines you see on a contour map, which so it's a line of equal elevation.
Right.
And he's talking about where the water comes up onto the beach, and it washes all of the dead bones of fish up onto the beach and then leaves them right where the water stops. So he describes it as an isocline of death. And I just remember thinking that is probably the most badass description you could ever give. And it really helped hit home that this is happening everywhere. Whether it's happening across the entire states or across the entire world, clearly this is happening everywhere.
This is a really great moment, and I would love for someone to really push this idea into a television show. In 28 Days Later, the one guy says this might not even be happening everywhere. Maybe it just happened in the States, and they've just quarantined us off and just let us fucking destroy ourselves. The way that it happened in Doomsday. Where Scotland just gets walled in, and they're just like, just let it happen. And then and then he almost gets killed, and he's looking up, and there's a plane flying over, and it just implied that this is not happening everywhere.
Dude,
and if a show could do that, and it spent the first season making you think that this new apocalypse world was everywhere, and you just get some little tiny glimpse of how this is actually not happening, and that their hope is that to potentially get over the wall. That would be amazing. That would be such a great show.
But now that you mentioned that, 28 Days Later is definitely going to have to be discussed. Because that movie is fantastic.
It's fantastic.
Fantastic.
It's a pretty standard way to start a story like that. You always have to have the character in a hospital. Walking Dead and 28 Days Later both start that way. Because it's the best way to do like a culture shock situation where you have the character be the viewer. I'm trying to think of a story where it like begins.
It means you can do a lot more spoon feeding without it being obvious.
Well, Rage does the same thing. You're a character who was part of a space thing. You got like, cryogenically frozen, and so you wake up into this new world, and so all the people are like, "Let me tell you about the world now.
Let me explain these things to you. Oh, you have amnesia?"
But you know what? What's his name from Cloverfield Lane? Dan.
The big guy?
Yeah.
John Goodman.
John Goodman.
Joe Rogan's friend. Joe Rogan's friend, Doug.
What?
So that's what we named one of our episodes, because you're like, yeah, like Joe Rogan's friend, Doug. What's his name? Like, what's his name? He's from Mall Cop. Kevin James?
Doug, because his name was Doug in King of Queens.
Yeah.
That's funny. But Dan Hagar is the character played. That's why I thought it was Dan. His name is Dan Hagar, played by what's his name? John Goodman.
Okay.
So if someone's gonna explain the new world to you, I mean, either make it Liam Neeson or John Goodman.
Yeah, they've got the voices.
They happen in both apocalypse films.
Or John Hurt. Oh, dude. Oops.
John Hurt.
John Hurt. He's dead though, so I guess he couldn't help anymore.
What did he do?
He was Zeus in that movie that copied 300, The Immortals.
What?
That guy is John Hurt.
That guy died?
Yeah, he died. I'm pretty sure John Hurt died.
Oh, no.
Unfortunately.
He was in that Dracula film you like.
He was in Dracula Untold?
Wasn't he Dracula?
No. In what? In Dracula Untold. Yeah, that's like a much more modern one. That's with
The Immortals. Zeus is played by a young guy.
Oh.
Are you sure that's John Hurt?
Shit, Hang on, no. Which movie am I thinking about?
The one that's made by the people who made 300 is The Immortals.
Oh, no, sorry. He is played by Zeus. He does play Zeus, but he plays the human form of Zeus that speaks to the main character. Because Zeus, yeah, he's the old man Zeus. No, you're totally right.
He's from V for Vendetta.
He is in V for Vendetta.
The Chancellor. That one has to come to the show.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
John Hurt.
He's also in Hellboy. There are things that go bump in the night.
January 25th, 2017.
Fuck.
Wow.
That was a long time ago. That's a lot longer ago than I thought it was.
Fucking great actor, man.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
He is so good at this, the Chancellor. He's the V for Vendetta, I'm pretty sure, is supposed to be a world. It's like now, but if the Nazis won and took over England.
A little, yeah.
So it's like several generations away, which is why Hitler's not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And he's basically Hitler. He's like a new Hitler. He even kind of like looks like him.
Yeah, and a lot of the symbolism is very similar.
You know the guy in the Tomb Raider films who's like the tech guy?
Yes.
He plays Hitler in Preacher.
What?
Yeah.
The TV show?
Yeah. Let me see. I forget his name. Now I'm gonna have Hitler in my
in your search history.
I mean, I wrote Preacher Hitler.
That's way worse.
It sounds like a really awful.
Many times worse.
I'm trying to remember his name.
Yeah, I definitely would not know that guy's name. I think his name was Boris in the actual movie.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Maybe I'm just making that shit up. It just seems like an appropriate name for him.
God damn it. I can't remember.
So let me tell you about the boat that he actually goes to versus the freighter that they show in the movie. Because that was actually an important scene in the book, all of the boat stuff. The boat is actually referred to as, it's written in Spanish, so I don't actually remember what the words were, but the boat is called the Bird of Hope.
Okay.
And I thought that was kind of interesting.
The Bird of Hope.
The Bird of Hope. And I thought, wonderful to put this super ironically named boat in one of the most depressing stories ever.
Noah Taylor.
Noah Taylor's the guy's name?
Actor's name, yes. It's amazing because they try to make you feel bad for Hitler because he's in hell. And it's like, you know, there's a whole like arc where he's like, he remembers like his personal hell is the day he feels he lost all of his goodness. And it was like part on the path to what he would later become.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to feel bad for him because he's had time to think about what he's done. It's like, I'm not going to start feeling bad for him.
Dude, that's what Dracula Untold is about.
Oh, okay.
Because in Dracula Untold, the main character is Vlad the Impaler. And he tries to justify the impaling of people by saying,
it saves people.
By impaling one village, you prevent the war that would kill all of the villages.
Right.
And you start to think, well, what? But no, sir, no, you can't drive people onto stakes alive and then say that was what you did for the greater good. I'm sorry, Vlad, but really you're just a blood-sucking monster.
Blood. Oh,
well, he's Dracula. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So the Bird of Hope is a sailboat, which is, as far as I understand, a lot more manageable in size than a barge, because he actually searches the whole thing. And he does actually, in the end, find a flare gun. But he also finds an old brass sextant, like that they used to use for navigation back in the day.
Oh, okay.
And when he picks it up, he says it is the first thing that has stirred him in a long time. Like, it's the first thing that excites him.
Oh.
Basically since the thing happened. Basically
that's really cool.
Since, yeah, and that's... So in 10 years, he's seen the first thing that he goes, wow, this is cool.
Kind of like when Eli shares how when he saw the boy, he thought he was dead.
Yeah.
He thought an angel was coming to see him because in his head, he had ruled out the possibility of ever seeing children again.
Ever again. And that is why the man believes he's a gift from God, because it's such a rare occurrence to see a young child.
It's like that moment. It's not like that moment, but it's similar in the child thing. In Children of Men, when you hear a news story about the youngest person on the world dying.
Yeah, he's like 22 years old
and
or
it's
whatever.
such a great way to describe, to like tell the audience that this is a weird world. Something's weird is happening right now.
Yeah, the youngest
I'm
person.
like, the youngest person? What?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Dude, that's another great one. That one potentially as well. So he goes to the boat to search for all these things, and he says to himself that he's just going to take this windfall for what it is. But he points out that sometimes good luck is not good luck when he doesn't necessarily want to keep going on. And I thought that it kind of leads to another line. Friendly fire isn't.
Right.
Well, in this world, good luck isn't anymore. It's not good luck. In fact, in a way, it's bad luck, because if you got unlucky, you would die and not have to deal with it. But you get lucky, and that means you have to keep going. So good luck really isn't anymore. And I thought that was really depressing.
There's a moment in Dexter when his father's longtime friend is in the hospital with cancer, and he comes to visit her, and he's like, not a very good day, and she's like, the cancer is slowing, and he's like, that's good news, and she's like, no, it just means I have to live longer.
Live with it for longer, yeah. And that's what this story really is about, is it worth living? That's the big question. I think Snowpiercer asked the same question.
Yeah, Walking Dead has a couple characters who say shit like we've been surviving, but how long has it been since we've lived? Which is like a really cliche line, but it's right. That is the problem with like trying to find a sustainable life. It's like, well, then what?
Yeah,
you just like live.
It's the extreme version of what Winston Churchill said, that many people die at 25 and are buried at 75. And that's because people don't do anything with their lives. But on the flip side of it, when people are not even given the opportunity to live their life, the same thing happens. In The Walking Dead, it's a double entendre, because the Walking Dead are the zombies, but they themselves are also the Walking Dead, right?
Rick actually says that.
Yeah.
We are the Walking Dead.
It makes you question what the purpose is. And I think that's why these stories are so important, because when you come out of them, you recognize that your own life is, in a way, perfect. Your own life has so much in it that is not in these other worlds.
We're so fortunate that we've discovered what we want to do with our long term with our lives. I can't imagine seeing no future beyond the weekend. And that's how most people live their lives. They look forward to the 2 of 7 days in their life when they can actually be themselves, and then they trudge through 5 days because it's just part of their life, and then they look forward to the weekend. And they live in this constant cycle of being reminded why they love their time off, and then the catharsis of suddenly being free, and then back to chains, and then free again. They're essentially just being... Something is taken away so that they appreciate it, get it back, and then go back to what they were doing, have it taken away again. It just goes back and forth. And for me, I see like years into the future. And I'm like, I can't imagine that this just being the life over and over again, just that like...
Well, the best way that I've heard anyone describe it is that every weekend is kind of like the time a boxer gets between rounds.
They used to be vacations, but now they're breathers.
Exactly. You're just trying to catch your breath.
And I get it. And I don't look down on those people, because most people are not lucky enough to discover something that is also within their grasp. We've spent years on YouTube without having to put a huge amount forward. We haven't had to take out business loans. We haven't had to move to California. We have the perfect opportunity to make stuff at our own pace without making giant leaps of faith and hoping that they work.
Yeah, like someone who wants to open a business, so they take out a loan for $100,000, right. And then after a year of operation, that money's gone, and you haven't generated profits, and
now you're down money. And for us, like the upkeep is very small, but also discovering it was kind of a fluke situation. It was just like I just happened to be into YouTube at the time. At the time, the style of what I wanted to do doesn't really pull the people in the way it used to. Like, it doesn't make the money that it used to. The highly edited whatever used to be the huge thing when I started. And now what you want is this long content. Long, easy to make content. We've made 1 hour and 45 minutes right now with 1 hour and 45 minutes. If you wanted to make 1 hour and 45 minute movie, it could take you 2 years.
That's a very good point.
And if you
it would
it on
be
YouTube,
a lot more interesting.
And if you put it on YouTube, you wouldn't make any money. If you put a 2-hour podcast on YouTube, you can make some money. What I mean is, like, if you took you 2 years to make a movie and you put it on YouTube, that 2 hours would not pay the 2 years it took.
Yeah.
But the time it's taking us right now will pay an effective amount for how much we spent or time we spent, which is why you're seeing so many people go to podcasting recently.
Well, also people want that. I think
people love podcasts.
I think that even these stories prove that what people really want is reality. And I don't think everyone has learned that is what they want, though. There's a lot of people that think what they want is things like reality television. But what they don't realize is that if they were to put in the mental effort to convince themselves they want to watch something with more substance, when it's over, they'd feel better. But they just don't recognize it because they've never been outside the cycle. It's the same as people who have never tried going low carb or no sugar. They just don't even realize the difference that would occur if they were willing to do that. Same as someone who's never exercised. They just don't understand that if they were to do it, they would actually want to do it more.
Even losing 10 pounds, the amount, how much better you feel first thing in the morning is amazing. And you lose 50 pounds and you're not dangerously underweight. Like if you go from 200 to 150 and you're like fairly lean individual, it's amazing how much better you feel. Like just simple things like just getting out of bed, just like moving and not feeling that weight like pulling you down.
Well, a good way to think about it is that a liter of water weighs about 2.2 pounds. So let's say you lose 20 pounds. Imagine having 10 liters of water strapped around your neck. And you're carrying that with you everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? These characters prove that all of their supplies have to be carried with them.
Yes. And
so the body can only carry so much for so far. And that's why they get so tired so quickly. That's why I love the scene where he's chasing the thief, because he has zero energy.
He's walking after him.
He's run walking.
Yeah.
And I like that also it's not like they come around the corner and he's there. Like he must have seen the thief and spent like 20 minutes trying to catch up to him, right?
And the thief is also trying to move quickly, and neither of them have any energy.
Yeah, exactly.
And then he has to like show him that he has a gun without shooting it because he has one bullet.
Yeah, there's no show of force. You can't shoot at the ground.
No.
You don't get that.
But on the topic of reality there's a great line in Mr. Robot where he says something to the effect of like, we haven't been living in reality since the Industrial Revolution. We turned off reality and took the batteries out of the remote. We're not interested in going back. Nobody wants to go back. But I think in some ways we do, which is why people fantasize a bit, which is why there's so many Earth-ending stories. They're all out there. And it's because we want to be reminded of what like the base form of existence is like, because we don't have it anymore. We don't exist in that world anymore. I regularly don't get enough groceries for an entire week.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because I subconsciously know that I don't have to. In the end, all I have to do is spend more money than I would going to the grocery store.
What you're saying is that you're not going to die if you don't have enough groceries.
In fact, not even just die. I can pretty comfortably live without having to do very much ahead of time. There's so many safety nets. There's so many things. There's even places like, there's some fast food places that have like 80-cent stuff that's actually as expensive as the grocery store. It's just worse on your body. There are so many things like waiting to catch you that you can fall back on. You can run out of money and just start spending money you don't have. We have so many things that are just ready to help you not prepare for the future that I've heard people like I've had to like argue with them because they've said, "Oh, I wish the world was like The Walking Dead." It's like, first of all, you have no idea what the world is like in that scenario, and that's why I like this book, because it's the realistic version of that, where nothing is great and everybody you meet is horrible and they're miserable too. But second of all, there's places you can go where you can get that experience, where there's no power, where the people that you meet are going to steal your shit, where you have a hard time finding food, where there's no society even close to what you know now. You can find that now. You can go there.
What those people don't want is to have to get up in the morning and go to work.
Right. They think
they think
it's better to live in a world where they're eating canned food with that isn't heated up, where they're punching it with a knife and searching broken down buildings, almost getting eaten alive, then go to their job.
It's a rose-colored glasses thing.
It's a grass is greener situation.
Exactly.
You'd rather live in a world where you can feel like you can do anything, because in this world you can't. You haven't been pushed to the brink here, so it isn't justified to steal.
For a long time, people have said that, these are the worst times ever to be living.
Which is what they say in every time period.
But I would say that this is the best time ever to live in human history. Yes. Absolutely.
It is the least war-torn, the least disease-filled. The Donald Glover line where his dad said it's the worst time to live. He's like, I'm pretty sure the 1300s was a worse time than now, where your entire village could be murdered and someone would say, what did you expect? It was nighttime. Like, that is the reality of still some places in the world where, like, just horrible shit like that happens all the time and no one even finds out about it.
Well, think about the era where the Mongols were around.
Right.
And Genghis Khan killed 10% of the world's population.
Yes. And people love to quote, I don't even know if this is true, how they would figure this out, but apparently people claim, this is one of those fun facts that I've never seen any, like, source material, is that they claim that Genghis Khan actually killed, it's actually pronounced Genghis, by the way, Khan killed so many people that it actually lowered the temperature of the earth. But I have no fucking idea how you get that specific with that information, but...
I didn't know about that. I knew that it changed the carbon footprint.
That's what I mean, yeah.
That would be really easy to see. Ice cores. You would see it.
Ice cores can get that specific, though?
Oh, like, yeah. Ice cores go down to the year.
Whoa.
Yeah, because what happens is every year it snows, and then the snow from the following year compresses the snow from the year before into what's called firn. Firn is a transition between snow and ice, and then eventually it gets transitioned into ice. So it's like tree rings. Every single year you get a new layer.
I just didn't realize it was that specific. So they can actually tell that he actually like lowered the temperature of the earth.
Yeah, because they can go through and say, oh, and look at this. Genghis was in this year, and the following like 2 or 3 years, suddenly we have a drop, which is crazy when you think about it. And you imagine that an event like this, where the world ends, would have a crazy change in the ice cores, because now there's fucking ash in the air, and there's no more sunlight, and it would be really weird to see what this world will be in the future. Because when you think about the 100 as dramatized as it was to have, science come back into the world 100 years later, 100 years after this book, or let's say 90, because the boy's already 10 years old, 90 years later, you're going to have the Left 4 Dead scenario you were talking, or not Left 4 Dead, Walking Dead scenario you were talking about, where you have actual civilizations that have started to formulate themselves.
Well, the grounders, as we call them in the 100, are the descendants of the people who survived the Great Waste. Like that, the people in this story are the people who pushed forward for humanity to even live long enough to be in Fallout, which is like 250 years after, or the 100, which is over 100 years after. If those people gave up the way that all the people they find that do give up, then there would be no future civilization. So, like, although they have an aimless objective, they're in like the back of their head, or like I guess like in their being, humans, like most creatures, just want to move forward because it's just part of us. And we just move forward, and then
it's the only way we
more.
Can live, right? That's the only way our species keeps going. And it's sort of an unconscious thing, right? That these groups of people aren't thinking about the future of the civilization. For the most part, they don't give a shit. They just want to live.
Yep. But
that's what they're doing. Yeah, they're pushing us forward. But what's also happening is that our species is selecting those who are the most violent. Those are the people who are surviving the longest, are the ones that are willing to commit the most heinous acts. So it's kind of interesting to think about what the world would grow into. The Grounders are great warriors. There's a reason for that. They're very much like the Vikings with Valhalla and their acceptance of the fact that being a warrior is vital to living. They need farmers, healers, and warriors. That's how their world is. Right? And that's something that I'm more fascinated about than anything else. What happens following the end of the world? Because we say the end of the world. But no, it's just the end of the bullshit we currently have and the starting of some new shit. That's what it is, right? They always say this.
I mean, what if
the world won't end? Mother Nature is not going to die. Just we are.
there was no Mother Nature? The Earth at one point was a giant ball of magma, and it eventually turned into a beautiful landscape of trees. Life, the way that Neil deGrasse Tyson describes it, life will never end. Once it has started, there will always be life eventually, even in the tiniest amounts, because some things can survive unbelievable conditions and eventually, through millions of years, turn into something else.
Mm-hmm.
Life will always live. He was talking about the tardigrades, we call water bears, that if an asteroid hit the Earth, it not only would it not kill the tardigrades, it would blast tardigrades out off of the Earth
Into space.
eventually landing on other planets to eventually, hundreds of millions of years later, potentially make more life. It could actually expand life.
That's one of the theories as to how life got here in the first place.
Right.
It's that asteroids may have landed with small amounts of organic material, and then from there, and that's that's a chicken and the egg question.
Right.
Right. Which came first?
He actually answers that question. It's like, whatever wasn't a chicken, there's a line between what was a chicken. Sorry, the first chicken.
Yeah, something that wasn't a chicken laid an egg.
That was a chicken.
That was a chicken,
So
which means the egg came
The egg
first.
came first. The
Absolutely.
one before it was like an ancestor to the chicken.
But to me, this is a harder question.
Mm.
Did life spontaneously form here? Or did it spontaneously form elsewhere and then get transported here? And is there a difference?
Well, what? Yeah, okay. But I always thought, what if we're on top of an old civilization that already happened? What if our ancestors, like we have like lots of theories about where humans came from, but what if that theory about humans evolving from something else happened already, and our humanity is there was an Earth whatever ending event, and it happened the way that it did in the Road, where very few people survived and eventually turned into the Crusades, and then we moved through all the. What if we came from that?
As far as I'm concerned, that has happened. And the main reason I would say that is you look at in the Gulf of Mexico, there is a set of pyramids that are 50,000 years old. What's that?
Are they on top of other pyramids?
No, actually, they are underwater, completely submerged underwater.
Huh.
And I don't know how much water it is, but I'm pretty sure it's hundreds of feet of water, which means those were built likely during the Ice Age when the water levels were that much lower.
Oh, shit.
Then you look at things like the pyramids, which, I'm sorry, but anyone who dates them to being like 3500 BC is just not looking at the evidence. The next time you could go back to is about 12,000 years ago.
Oh, geez.
But as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't even really make a tremendous amount of sense unless you believe Robert Schoch. But we'll go into that in a minute. So the next time before that it reasonably makes sense for them to be built is 35,000 years ago.
That's crazy.
So my theory is that at some point we were at least almost as advanced as we are today. I would believe it because they
believe that there was like some sort of material on the pyramids that generated electricity when water went down it, right?
Yeah. So originally there was an outer shell of limestone that was built with pure calcium-based limestone. So limestone, when it forms, can either have all calcium, or it can be a mixture of calcium and magnesium. And when it has a mixture of the two, it's called dolomite. It's a slightly different thing, but it's still basically limestone. So the inside was built with this magnesium-rich dolomite, and that's why it's sort of a brownish, orangish color, because the dolomite is usually like a yellow-brown. So that conducts electricity because of the magnesium. Magnesium is the same element that plants use for photosynthesis.
Oh.
So it's a very conductive element. And in fact, that's what's in Epsom salts when you take a bath, because we need that in our body. It's in hemoglobin, magnesium.
Oh.
So the inside stone is very conductive to electricity. That outside limestone on the surface was calcium-based, which means it does not conduct electricity basically at all. So what happens is there's these holes in the bottom of the pyramid where water from groundwater can rise and fall. And what happens is that the water rising and falling generates charge within that internal stone. and the charge is not able to escape because of the outside layer. The outside layer holds in the charge, doesn't allow it to escape to the atmosphere.
Oh.
That buildup of charge causes the pyramid to literally glow.
Whoa.
The theory was that they built the pyramid to be a nightlight. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So you think about all this technology and all these sites, like Ganam Padang is a man-made mountain where they took stones that only form vertically and laid them horizontally. So you know it was done by people. This thing was built 20,000 years ago. And then 3,000 years ago, a new ancient site was built atop that mountain, not even realizing what it was.
On top of it.
They even, Ganam Padang translates to the Mountain of Enlightenment. Does that really sound like something that would be given to it if it weren't a place of learning? Or in some sort of, I believe that we are going to build our own pyramids before we're done, before all is said and done in our version of society. What's going to be really fucking crazy is when 14,000 years from now, archaeologists go, who are these dudes whose faces got carved into a mountain?
Yes.
These guys must have been so important back then that they actually cut their faces right into the rock. And they'll be like, who are these guys? Like, these guys must have been amazing.
The funny thing is that there's not a lot that we've made now that would survive longer than things that were made 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, the Great Wall of China would survive a lot longer than our buildings, right?
That is a fantastic question. I believe so because it's built out of stone, but it still has mortar in it. And the mortar is the weak point.
Oh, okay.
Because the mortar will wear terrain, whereas a pyramid, it's friction. It's built just by stacking these objects.
I love it when they say that the Great Wall of China is the only man-made structure that can be seen from space. It's such a broad statement because from space could be any distance.
Dude, I can see my house from space.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, we have satellites now that can see individual people from space. And on top of that, there are several man-made structures that can be seen from space, including roads.
Well, I think they mean with the naked eye. In which case,
from what distance? Like from a space station, naked eye, you can see it. And
I think so. I think so.
But nothing else can be seen.
I bet you can see the pyramids.
I gotta say, there's probably a couple things big enough to be seen from there.
Yeah, and I think that's just one of those. That is one of those memes. It's a cultural meme that people have just sort of carried forward, right? It makes sense because it's huge, and you know, so I get that. But yeah, I think you're probably right. What you may be able to see is the places where China borders up against the wall, right? Because they built the wall and there's civilized, like there's cities next to the wall.
Right.
So you could probably see where they, you know, this big city escape or city expanse, and then all of a sudden nothing. On the other side is darkness. Maybe you could see that. Like you.
Oh, the light. Okay.
Yeah, there would be like this linear feature for some reason. So maybe you could notice that.
That is really cool. The what places look like at night. And you can, it's like a direct, it's like a topographical map of exactly where we all live. It's like it actually demonstrates, because we so consistently use light, we can tell how many people there are in each place, because there's like spots like New York that's just like way brighter than everything else.
Something they did in the 60s, I think, or maybe even the 40s or 50s. They had an on-television vote that they wanted to do in Russia for like America's Got Talent kind of thing, but the Russian version. And so what they did was they had people at home turn their lights on and off at certain, like they would say, okay, vote for this person. And people would turn their lights off and they would measure the difference in how much electricity the country was using.
Holy.
And that's how they voted for the television show.
That sounds really dangerous.
It's not a good idea.
They say during huge television events like the Super Bowl that there's like giant increases in electricity at commercial breaks because of microwaves. Like huge numbers. And I used to work in a food service place, and you used to find rushes that happened all at the same time. And the leading theory, I guess, was commercial breaks. It was people making phone calls at the same time, because they were all watching the same event. Whoa.
Yeah. That is why I like this story. It's why I like Snowpiercer. It's why I like anything written by George Orwell, because they all examine what do humans do as an organism, as a combined organism. This book only follows two characters, but it gives you a lot of insight into how that organism functions.
The first comic of The Walking Dead says in the beginning, before the story begins, that this is a story about what would we do if we didn't have grocery stores and cell phones and reality television. How would people be in a world where they had no distractions, where they had no illusions of what the world really was, when we didn't protect each other the way that we do. And that's why when people say, like, the show's not even about zombies anymore, it was never about zombies.
In the first place.
The only reason why zombies were such a big issue in the beginning was because people didn't know how to deal with them. Once they figured out how to deal with them, they realized that people are way worse. That living people are so much worse because the dead don't care about you. They're not trying to kill you. They just want food. They're just like the brainless version of humanity. Whereas living people want the same thing, but they're willing to do the worst shit to get it.
And I think it's the same in this. This is not a story about nuclear war. The nuclear war isn't even explicitly said.
Well, the way that the event and the road is the setting. The Walking Dead are a setting. They are a character. As one group, they are a character, and they're also the setting of the story. They build the world that the characters then interact with each other in a completely different way than they would without that setting. And that's what the road is. This whatever bright light is just a setting, not a story about an explosion.
Yeah, exactly. It's a story about a man doing what he feels is necessary to protect his child. My favorite parts about books like this are the subtle nuances. So he sees the flash of light, the clock stops,
and he remembers the time too.
Yeah,
the clock stopped at 1:41 or something like that.
Yeah, which I thought was really creepy. And then he gets up and goes and starts running the bath. And the wife says, "Why are you taking a bath?" And he says, "I'm not."
And he doesn't explain
it.
I love that.
Those scenes, man,
I think this guy's got to know something. Like something in his life or in his job before the event, something made him like he's aware of that happening. And the guy, Eli, tells him that there was warning signs, that he knew it was going to happen.
Well, clearly the man did too.
And then they both discuss how neither of them wanted to do anything. They didn't want to prep for it because neither of them wanted to believe it was going to happen.
Well, the man almost seems to have prepped for it because it looks like their house is already...
Their house had like a shit ton of candles.
Yeah, their house was already prepared for the war before it even started, it seemed like. And the reality is, you don't have business as usual next day nuclear war. Usually you get the countdown clock, or you get the embargo, or you get the whatever. There's usually some signs. There usually is something that leads up to it. Every time there's some sort of a major war, you see those signs and symptoms. It would be very rare, possible, but rare, for us to just wake up one morning and someone be like, "Oh yeah, by the way, like the bombs are on their way."
We probably wouldn't know about it beyond the what's it called, the emergency thing, which I actually don't get.
Well, have you?
Which I'm kind of all right with.
Did you hear about what happened with the emergency alert system in Hawaii? And by the way, for anyone who's here listening about the road, probably I do realize we're totally off, but
no, this is right on point because this is the story. This is like
yes,
yeah,
and I think that's what I'm saying. That we're not talking about the road, but we're talking about what the road means for the world.
Right.
I like to imagine the road as being set thousands of years ago, because
I would like to believe that it's actually a not a warning sign, but like an example, a way to teach people a lesson before the thing happened.
Yeah. Oh, you really think that it would be fun, huh?
It would be horrible.
So I believe it was on the Big Island. I'm not certain. But on one of the islands of Hawaii, they inadvertently, while trying to send out a test, sent out an alert that said, "Ballistic missiles are on their way from North Korea. This is not a test." Yeah. And they sent it out to everybody.
And it was like 40 minutes before they corrected themselves, too.
Yeah, and so
brutal.
So Joe Rogan interviewed the woman who I believe is like the state representative for Hawaii. And what she was saying was that she was actually in Washington, D.C. when this happened. So she wasn't even there to like act on it. So she was like calling people to try and figure out what was going on. And she's in D.C. And then the stories that she was telling, there was one guy who lowered his daughter down into a sewer so that she would be protected if a missile were to land there.
Jeez.
This other guy was in a city right between the cities that his 2 kids were in. So he had to decide if he wanted to go spend his last minutes with one or the other because he'd have to drive out to them. And that's, you know, these are the things that people don't think about.
Well, even worse is that it's not even like a moment where you can look back on and say, you know, the world was ending, I had to make a choice, because the world didn't end. So now he has to live with that decision on which child he went for.
Even if the kids don't know he made the decision, he knows.
I mean, you got to make the survival situation, right? You got to go for the one who's like needs the most help, I guess.
Or the one who's in a place where they might survive. You know,
Right.
if one person like is in a bunker and the other person's in a shack, you know, like it's a hard choice. But that is what these books point out, that we live in an era where we have the luxury of choice. And that's something that can be very quickly taken away from you.
Well,
And you gotta remember that when you say stupid shit like, I want to live in the world of The Walking Dead.
or this is the worst time ever. It's actually just the most reported time ever.
Yeah.
This is where doom and gloom happens. Every time YouTube makes a change, there's at least 5 fucking YouTubers who say YouTube is dying. YouTube is a giant 50-foot fucking shark. It is not going to die unless the whole world does.
Yeah.
And yet, like we're so obsessed with the end of everything. I forget who said it, but ever since humanity has existed, we've been coming up with how it'll end. We're always thinking about that because it's the most extreme version of reality we would ever have to deal with, and we want to believe we can prepare for it.
Now, if I can put this in a way that people will maybe understand a little better, we always think that we want to be in these stories because we see the stories through the eyes of the protagonists.
Yes, the survivors.
Imagine being the guys in Walking Dead who got smashed over the head and killed in Terminus rather than the ones who escaped and survived. Imagine being the thief who tries to take the cart and ends up naked and afraid and alone rather than the main characters.
Well, most likely you will be part of the first wave of death.
Yeah.
You will probably be one of the original zombies.
Well, and to bring Joe Rogan up again, he actually talks about this regularly. He says, I don't want to survive the first wave.
No.
Why would you want to deal with that?
That's why I'm glad that we're on top of the super volcano, because if it goes off, I'd like to be on the underside of it.
On top of?
Like it's like the Yellowknife, right?
Yellowstone.
Yellowstone.
But it's not even close to us.
But its explosion would probably destroy us, would it not?
Not the explosion.
Shit.
Well, actually, you know what would really ragdoll us would be the winds.
Oh.
So it would go off. So Yellowstone, we live in southern Ontario. So Yellowstone is probably a couple thousand kilometers west and maybe a few hundred kilometers south of where we are.
Oh.
So it's in the northwestern United States. It explodes.
Oh, Yellowstone's in the States.
Yeah.
I'm mixing that with Yellowknife.
Yeah, and Yellowknife actually is even further from us than Yellowstone.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, but it's all right. So if it were to go off, there would be this massive plume of ash that would go into the air, and the prevailing winds in North America go from west to east. So that ash would just come and dump itself all over the Great Lakes. It would poison our water. It would cover our landscape. We would be screwed if it went off. But we would actually deal with the worst of it because we would not be killed by the explosion. We would not see any lava. We would lose the sun. Our crops would die. Our breathing air would become poisoned by the ash. So we would actually probably suffer a worse fate than those who live there. What you want to be is Woody Harrelson.
Yeah.
Standing there getting hit in the face by the first piece of rock that gets dislodged.
Isn't that what he even says? Like, I don't want to be hereafter. Like, I just want to go out with the explosion.
Yeah.
Like,
I think his character is beautiful.
He's actually
in
like the
movie.
smartest character in that book or in that movie, because fucking John, whatever his name is like, no, I want to drive a limo through the cracking earth and then fly over the water. The fucking disaster is just chasing them throughout that whole movie.
Mm-hmm. But I like that Woody Harrelson's character, he even makes that clear that that's what he wants to do. He even says, you should be here to see it, man. It's beautiful.
Yeah, because he wants to just appreciate the rest of his life and not live it in this horrible, constant fear of the next...
His struggle.
Yeah.
I am definitely on team people. I want people to continue because I feel like there are great things that people do. People often talk about how humans are the only ones that destroy their environment. And when you look at Snowpiercer, The Road, Walking Dead, all of these things are people's faults. Well, actually, maybe not The Walking Dead.
Well, Walking Dead is kind of interesting because it's like a naturally occurring thing. It's a virus that, I mean, it's happened before. The Black Plague took us down to like 10% population.
In certain areas.
Oh, okay.
But those other two, The Road, nuclear war, Snowpiercer was a science experiment gone wrong. You know, most of these things...
100 was also a science experiment.
Yes. So most of these things are humans bringing about the destruction, and people often say, you know, animals don't destroy the environment around them.
That's not always true, but...
In fact, that is never, ever true. Do you know what happens if you get rid of all predators? The ungulates destroy the plant population.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what ungulates are, they're like deer and elk and moose. They're generally hoofed, but not always. They're the herbivores.
They just don't have the ability. If a moose could press a button and harvest all of its food at the same time, it would unstoppably harvest.
Yes. Every single creature that exists would continue to utilize its resource until that resource is gone. And at that point, it would start to die. So let me give you 3 examples at every different layer. Plants. When a plant becomes too successful, it takes over massive swaths of land. And then what happens is when disease comes there, there's no biological diversity of the plant. So that disease spreads like wildfire and it massacres the plant population.
Because there's nothing else, there's no difference.
Yes, exactly.
So when something comes along that targets a specific thing, but that specific thing is everything, and it's all gone. Interesting.
And also, each of the plants is using the same nutrients, which means that the soil is not being replenished of the nutrients that plant's using. So let's say the plant has a really high magnesium consumption. The soil will very rapidly have 0 magnesium left, and the plants will have problems growing. That's why you can't grow corn on the same field every year. It depletes the soil, it drains it. So then you go up the scale a little bit. Let's look at something like the ungulates. They will continue to eat the plants until all the plants are gone, and they will then starve because they don't have anything to eat. They will fight each other over the remaining food.
Didn't they think that a lot of plant-eating dinosaurs did that because they're so big that they just completely decimated forests?
Probably. That's actually the reason Brontosaurus were nomads. Because they couldn't stay in one area. Trees don't grow that fast.
They had to move.
120-ton creature needs so much foliage that you have to roam.
Didn't like certain animals in Africa turn it into what it is now?
Yes, well, elephants are a big reason the savanna exists because elephants will actually pull trees out of the ground. Like elephants fuck things up, man. They're strong creatures.
Yeah.
But then you go from the ungulates to the predators. If you have 400,000 wolves and only 100,000 deer, it's only a matter of time before those wolves kill everything. Every deer, every fox, every rabbit, every squirrel they can find. And then they too start starving to death. They start fighting each other. And those
cannibalism, the same way that The Road goes.
Same with bears, right? When bears get to the point that there's no food, the adult males will start cannibalizing the babies. And that's why almost every species other than humans and a few select types of mammals, only one parent protects the child. In almost every species, it's only the mother, because that is a biological fact that the father will eat the kid if it needs to live. That's the way it goes. The mother's the only one with enough of a connection to the child to not eat it. And even then, we've heard stories. I don't know. A male bear killed a cub, and once the female drove off the male bear, she realized her cub was dead, so she ate it.
Yeah.
Because now it's food, right?
Yeah.
So what these people don't seem to recognize is that humans destroy our environment the same as every other animal. We are just way better at it. The same way we're better at everything.
There's a moment in Walking Dead when a guy says to Rick that the two of us have both come from the same place and ended up in the same place, and we probably took a similar journey. The only difference between you and I is I was the one lucky enough to have the gun. Like that's it. And so humans we just have the ability to destroy the environment faster than we can replenish it. But we also have the ability to notice that, and for people to go ahead and try to, we're not at an equal rate right now. At the moment, we're dumping way too much shit into the ocean to the point where it's actually creating these like tiny, I don't know what they are, little things of plastic, like extremely tiny balls of plastic that are essentially particulates, which are expanding into the whole thing. But there are also people trying to fix it. At the moment, it's not an equal rate. Eventually, we'll hopefully try to rebalance that. But the issue is that the ocean is a connected body of water shared by all humanity. So we can't get everyone together to agree to not dump shit in the ocean. But if we could probably flip it around.
Yeah, something I hope we deal with this problem in our life. I've started to see a bunch of different technologies that take carbon out of the atmosphere. The first one is they've started using carbon to reinforce concrete. So they actually pump carbon into the concrete mixture. It makes it harder, makes it last longer, and they can sequester more carbon in a single building than they could in many acres of forest. Then I saw another company that's taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, and they're actually turning it into gasoline because all gasoline is a bunch of carbons with a bunch of hydrogens around it. So all you have to do is take the CO2, strip off the oxygen, and put hydrogens on it, and you can make gasoline. So now imagine we go 50 years into the future, and we have to put regulations on how much carbon you're allowed to take out of the atmosphere. Because now all of these technologies that all along, no one's going to say, oh, well, don't take too much because we have shitloads of it, right? But then imagine we get to a point where suddenly the carbon is starting to drop below where it was when the Industrial Revolution started. And then we go, whoa. If you take any more carbon out of the atmosphere, we might actually have an ice age. So I think that might actually be something that we almost see the opposite problem in our lifetime.
We might actually reverse it and things get too cold.
Well, we might then be worried about that because now you've got these people who are running a business where they make millions of dollars a year putting carbon into this concrete, and it's free because no one cares if you take the CO2. And then all of a sudden we go, oh shit, hang on, now we're at equilibrium. Now we need you to stop taking carbon. And they go, what the fuck? We've been doing this all along. This is my business, right? What you pointed out about humans being the only ones that can change things, that is the difference. We're the only ones that can say, hey, we're destroying this thing. Let's fix it. Deer don't go, hey, whoa, guys. Everyone needs to reduce the amount they eat by about 25% if we want the plant life to survive. No, those fucking deer are just going to stab each other to death with their antlers and eat whatever the fuck they want.
Well, the same way I was saying that for every new lock is a new way to get through it. It's the same way when we were using, was it DDT on crops and it was putting a shit ton of something in the air? We did it for a long time because it was really effective, and eventually a law was passed to realizing how dangerous that was, constantly putting it in the air. Right now, we're still arguing about what's changing the climate. Eventually, hopefully, we'll figure it out and agree on it and decide what to do about it. But we probably won't put a law in place at the same time to make sure that doesn't go too far, the way that you were talking about carbon, right? We'll probably say, hey, the government will help you out and subsidize shit if you help us bring the temperature down in the earth. It could turn into something where it gets too fucking cold, and then we're going to have to pass a new law. There's always going to be people who want to take advantage of the situation because it's the same mentality that got us this far. If you were a vegan in the 1800s and you found a place you wanted to build something, but there was a bear there and you said, no, let me leave it, and you went somewhere else and you're like, oh, no, there's foxes here, let me leave it, you would never build a city, ever, if you cared that much about... There always has to be... It's like the same way that serial killers and top CEOs have extremely similar brains, but small changes in there that prevent one from doing the other. They're the same style of person with a small branch of difference, right? Mm-hmm. That's the same thing. Like, people who are willing to take advantage of that situation and make the world too cold are the same people who would say, fuck this bear, I'm going to kill it, then I'm going to build something here, and if any other bears want to come here, I'll kill them too. You can't have that person who's like super conscientious of all things around them who is also going to make a super successful civilization.
I think one of the problems is that what you said from Walking Dead, you are either the butcher or the cattle. In a way, that's true. You're either eaten or you either eat or are eaten. that is the way that nature is. And the problem is thinking we're not nature. If you think humans are unnatural, that means we play by different rules, but that's a bad assumption.
That's not true either.
And this book really proves that that is a bad assumption, because suddenly they're thrust back into nature. It's interesting that there's no animals, because they don't have that to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
You'd assume that at least in the first few years, there would have been like hungry wolves and hungry bears and like all this other crazy wildlife that was being forced out of the forest and into civilization. But these people who are just there to rebuild the world don't have the same tools we have today. So the world they rebuild is going to be much more like you said, like the Crusades and these other things. They're going to build a world that will take thousands of years to get to where we are now. So basically what I'm saying is you should read The Road or watch it and then reevaluate your thoughts on whether or not this is the best time ever to live.
Yeah.
And I'll also leave you with the fact that they do see some signs that the world is getting better. They find a ladybug.
Oh, we found a beetle in the movie.
Yes.
They found a beetle.
Find a
I didn't
beetle
even
in
make
the
that
movie.
connection to right now. There were no animals or bugs at all, and then he finds a living creature.
A beetle, yeah.
Wow, I never connected that.
And the boy says, what is it? Because he's never seen anything that
it.
lives. And so it's a good example that everything ends, but everything also starts again.
There's plant life that exclusively grows in scorched parts of a forest.
There's plant life in Australia that can only grow after a forest fire because its seeds aren't released until extreme heat is applied to the outside shell. So it's something to remember. It's a worthwhile watch. It's a worthwhile read. I honestly advise doing both because I don't think that one is going to ruin the other for you.
Okay.
But I will say that it's not for the faint of heart. I actually can't decide whether it was harder watching him die or read about him dying. I don't know, because I actually came to pick you up that day. You were taking your cat to the vet, and I came to pick you up the day I was reading about the father dying. And normally I would finish the page I'm on before I quit reading, but I started reading it. I realized it was the page he was gonna die, and I saw you coming out of the vet, and I was like, screw it. Same with watching the movie. When I came up on that scene, I just went, nope, not right now. I'll deal with this emotional weight at another time. Oh, jeez. Yeah, just don't expect to walk out of this movie with happy, fun feelings, but you will walk out of it thinking a little bit more about everything around you.
It'll probably make you think, because it's not a positive story.
No, but Vigo is fantastic.
Oh yeah,
love it.
So is the kid. Everyone, actually, there's nobody who pulled me out of that film. Like, there's no part of that film that, like, even the part where he like flare guns that guy and the woman doesn't fight him.
Oh yeah, I forgot. So the following thing, I gotta get back to that.
Right.
And I'll talk about the woman as well as part of it. So the following thing. They hammed that one up a little bit in the movie because I think they wanted it to seem like a circular thing. Like, you know, we're being followed. Are you following us? Yeah, we were following you.
Right.
They're trying to do that. But what I found was the first time they thought they were being followed, they were by 4 people. The people with the baby, the people who ate the baby.
Who been not in the movie though.
Right, in the book.
Happen, yeah.
Yes. The other time he thought they were being watched was when they saw the boy and heard a dog in a city. Odds are there was people living in that city and they just hid there. Maybe those were the people who followed them along to the end, but there's no dog in the book. There was no dog at the end in the book. That was a movie decision. So my thought is that those people were just hiding in the city, not wanting to be found. Then there's the people who actually followed them and ate the baby. Then further down the line, the guy shoots the arrow at him out the window. What was interesting about this scene, the guy shoots the arrow at him out the window. He hits him with the flare gun, setting him on fire. He never explicitly says that he kills him, but he set him on fire, so you kind of assume he died. Then he goes up there, and he does not find the bow and arrow. The bow and arrow is gone when he gets up there. It's just the woman and the dead man. And it's really crazy how smart the man is. He doesn't ask questions without knowing what he's looking for. Like, he gets up there, he sees the woman with the man, and he says, "Where are they? Did they leave you?" And she says, "I left myself." meaning she could have gone with the other men who presumably took the bow and left, but she stayed because this was probably the man she was with.
Right.
Now, what I'm thinking is this is probably the same 4 people that ate the baby, because it's a man and a woman, and there was other people there who could have been the other 2 men. So I don't really think that because it does say that the man at the end who saves the boy, it does say that he was following them.
Right.
But I don't think they were following them the whole time. I think they were probably following them for the last 2 days while the man was dying.
Right.
My guess is that they came in late into the story. I think they tried to make that one a little too Hollywood. That is the only criticism I do have. Because why are you following us? That was a little weird. I do remember that being kind of odd. But yeah, he never asked that woman if she was following them. Not once. It's so funny. He goes up there. She's sitting there with her dead on fire husband. And he says, where are they? And she says, they left. And then he says, actually, I don't even think he says anything else. He just leaves.
In the movie, he says, why are you following us? And she said, you were following us.
Mm-hmm. Which is probably why they got shot at, because those people thought that they were following them. But I just thought it was interesting that they chose to disclude the additional characters.
That would have been a much better way to do the story.
Well, that was one of the only moments that they actually deviated from the dialogue. Almost every other scene in that movie, including when they catch the thief, the dialogue might as well be word for word, man.
That's awesome.
And it blows my mind how well they did it. The final scene where he's talking to the man who takes him in, I would honestly say is word for word. And when you hear it done in the book, it seems, like I said, less intimidating. But when you're watching it in the movie, it's way scarier because the words are actually coming out of the guy's mouth. And when he says things like, you can't trust me, it's freaky. And I really appreciated that they didn't think, you know what? Cormac McCarthy's a great writer, but you know who's a great writer? Pete Fuckface, who makes screenplays. No, they said, let's make this story the way Cormac McCarthy wrote it.
Most films are, Pete Fuckface is usually the screenplay writer for most of the, especially video game movies. Hitman, the 2 Hitman films are, one of the few games or game movies that are actually, they actually give a shit about the fucking source material. Tomb Raider also is fucking excellent. It is a great representation of the characters. The tone and everything is there. The company that made Ratchet and Clank in 2003 couldn't remake it right in 2016. The company that made it.
That's a good example of how companies and individuals are such completely different concepts.
I'm talking the characters weren't even the same. It's called Ratchet and Clank. That's like if this story was called The Man and the Boy, and it was just a girl for some reason in the movie, and it's like, okay.
I think this story is also a good example of how an individual is everything. So modernly we think, this guy is the manager at my job, so he manages things. Yes, there are duties that are put towards his job description, but the reality is no one can do the job the way he can, unless he's shit. Then that happens. But the things that a person can bring to the table are so drastically different from the things that are described on paper. For example, the man is the father. He's supposed to protect the boy. But it goes so much beyond that. It's about teaching him. It's about protecting him from the things he sees and hears. It's about conditioning him to live on his own. And it's kind of weird that the boy actually goes straight from his father to the other man. I almost wish there was a 5 to 7 day period where the boy had to go out on his own and discover his own food.
That would have been great.
But I think the reason he didn't do that is by the time you get to that point in the story, you're so fucking exhausted that you can't go on. Seriously, when you watch the movie, when you read the book, by the time the man's dying, you're like, thank God. I can't do it anymore.
It also changes the pacing of the movie by having the family find him right after the man dying. It kind of it changes the theory about how it actually ended by making it so unrealistic. The whole film is very realistic, and then suddenly as one caretaker dies, another one shows up, almost seemingly to be a better caretaker. Because they have a larger group, they have a dog. This guy's clearly well outfitted. He's got shotgun shells all over him, right?
Yeah, well, they described the shotgun cells as being sealed with candle wax, which I thought was nice.
So he makes them. Right, so you've got this guy who's probably a survival expert with a larger group with an animal, so it's probably better, he can probably hunt or even know about people. He's actually upgraded in his caretakers, essentially as soon as the other one is gone, he's found a new one, which changes the perspective of the person watching it, and it makes them question whether that was even realistically possible, leading to our theory about maybe it didn't even happen.
It's so funny that's my theory about every fucking book, because that's what I said about The Giver, too. I said he died, yeah.
Yeah. I mean people do... That
Why
happens,
can't
right?
I read books where people live?
I mean, Shrek?
That wasn't a book, but yes, you're right. That was... And I do want to do other things where people live, and it works out. Not every story I want to read is horrifyingly depressing, but I just feel like horrifyingly depressing stories teach you more than nice happy fairy tales.
Yep.
The reason people think that bears and tigers and lions are nice is because they watch Disney movies and they forget that a real bear will not only eat your lunch, he'll eat you and won't even think twice about it.
They're giant rats. They are huge fucking rats that will eat anything that they want.
Fucking rats.
They are. Have you ever seen a bear soaking wet where all its fur is completely following their contours?
Look really weird.
They're horrifying. They're fluffy when their fur is out, and they look really cute and huggable. But when they get soaking wet, they are honestly giant mutant bears from Fallout. That's what they look like.
It's one thing I appreciate about wolves is they look terrifying all the time. They do not look cuddly.
No.
Bears look cuddly. Bears look like, oh, come on, come over here. Wolves are like, yo, you stay the fuck away from me. They're clearly not dogs. When you see a wolf, you can see that look in its eye.
The worst thing about wolves is that they have smaller mouths, so they take a lot longer killing something.
Ooh.
Like a bear can just fucking immediately like rip parts of you off, and it's like...
The difference, though, is I'm pretty sure that wolves try to kill you.
Do they go for the throat?
Yeah, so this is something so predators, or carnivores, sorry, will try to kill their prey and then eat it because they don't have a fight anymore. Omnivores don't seem to care if their prey is dead or not.
It's just really fucked up, yeah.
The bear will just start eating you. It doesn't have to make sure you're dead. It'll just start eating you alive, and you'll die in the process of being eaten. It's the same with monkeys. Monkeys will eat smaller monkeys without killing them. They'll just start eating them, and they'll die by being eaten. These are the things that I want books to show myself, and I want them to show other people. I want people to live in reality. I want them to plug back into reality. You know, going back to the Mr. Robot thing, take the remote, turn on the television. You don't have to spend every minute of every day in the road realizing how shit the world is. What you do have to do is remind yourself that the world we live in is a Garden of Eden compared to what it could be.
This is Elysium.
Absolutely.
We're living in a part of the world that is not equal to other places in education, healthcare, job opportunities.
But because it's not in space, people don't think about it that way.
Exactly. It might as fucking well be for some countries, for some people who live in countries where they don't have the money to leave or are not even allowed to leave. Who live in extremely poor places where we are basically a space station in comparison. My fucking biggest problems are that sometimes my air conditioning gets a little too cold. Sometimes I have to wait a little longer for the bus. I have to take the bus for the groceries. Those are my biggest fucking problems in my life. Or that I have to go back to work tomorrow. Oh no, full-time employment.
Yeah. Oh, you get to be productive for society?
Oh, jeez.
What a terrible thing to have.
Like, I have friends who like got new jobs, but they don't get full-time hours. I got full-time hours immediately because that was the point. I moved from one full-time job to another one without an interruption in my income. That's amazing. And it's actually a pretty normal thing for people to be able to move from one to the other.
Yeah.
Because we have options. Imagine trying to quit a job in the Fallout world or a Book of Eli. Imagine being the bartender at that guy's thing and being like, hey, in 2 weeks, I'm going to leave for another job. He'd fucking kill you. He would kill you.
Or he'd say, fine, and you'd go die in the desert.
Or he would say, sure, if you think you can make it out of the door. Like, he probably wouldn't let you leave. You'd probably be part of that forever.
Or he would say, fine, 100 other people would want this job. This is the only job for 1,000 miles.
Yeah.
And that's something that people always forget. And that's something that I personally have to remind myself of all the time, because, I mean, I don't even have to deal with the bus problem. Or like, I feel like I don't have problems in my life. And so these stories are a way for me to remind myself that other people have problems.
It's a vicarious thrill is what it is. It's living through the life of someone else and experiencing something without having to always be part of it. I'm sitting there eating my fucking chicken nuggets while I'm watching a movie about somebody who has no food.
Yeah.
I mean, I was actually thinking about that because they were like freezing to death. They're like super cold. They're wet and they're freezing and they're holding themselves. They're holding their arms. And I'm laid out in my pajama pants watching this horrible experience because we live in a place where like everything is sheltered. Even like there's little glass boxes at the bus station so that you don't get rained on.
That's so true.
Someone went to the trouble of making sure that someone's half an hour wait is sheltered.
I think that it's good to get your perspective from fiction, because when you get your perspective from nonfiction, it's still beneficial. I wouldn't say that people need to turn a blind eye to the world or anything of that nature. But it's very easy to be depressed by what you see when you see it in the real world. When you see squalid poverty, when you see horrible violence, all these other things out in the world, they make you feel like humanity has lost. But when you watch this, you realize that there are way worse things than what you're dealing with. And there are people who are going through hell on earth without you having to feel depressed about where we're going with our society.
Well, the reason why the news is still such a popular thing is because people want to learn from other people's scenarios. And the news is almost entirely about the negative aspects of the world, about how many died and how many were injured and how much destruction there was, because people think that they can learn enough from that to not be part of it. And the reality is they fucking can't. Doesn't matter how many car accidents you hear about or how many explosions and random violence that there is out in the world that you learn from, you can't get away from it if it happens around you. It's like everyone thinks that they're the guy who could get away from the bear or get away from whatever it was happening. But in reality, all the people who were part of that, who were in the path of some great disaster, all of them believe they could get out too. All believe that when it happened to them, that they would be the guy.
Hundreds of millions of dreams.
Yeah.
Burned away.
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually talks about one scene where there's tens of thousands of people melted into the road because of a fire. And he talks about how each and every one of these people had a dream and a hope that got burned alive with them. And that's why I prefer anti-heroes to heroes. Because most people, 99% of people, except for the very, very rare occasional person like Schindler, everyone is an anti-hero. They try their best, or a villain, I guess. They try their best, they do what they can, but are not always able to win. It's like Patrick Stewart said in, well, he didn't say it, his character did in Star Trek. It is possible to do everything in your power and still fail. It is not your fault, that is just the way life is. And I think that anti-heroes prove by watching, 1984 is a great example, because it's a character fighting and not getting anything for it. And it's a much better example than a character who fights against all odds and manages to topple the huge, vast government, because it makes all of us feel like we are that character, but we're not.
No.
What we are is drops of water in a pond, or let's say tiny fish in a school. Each of those fish can't correct the path of the school, but if all of the fish move in the same direction, they will. So that's something we need to remember, is that everyone is a little tiny cog in the machine. One cog no longer turning does not affect the machine. But if one cog is able to convince the cogs around it to turn the opposite direction, that's where change happens. And that's where social media is going. right? It's the cogs are finally talking to each other. That's what social media is. It's bringing those cogs together so that they can move en masse. They can say, all right, us 50,000 people are all going to do this thing.
Yep.
I just think as depressing as they are, they're still worth it. I'm trying to convince people that they should read about this guy dying over the course of 280 pages. And I know it's not exciting, but it's not supposed to be exciting. It's supposed to be insightful.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
supposed to make a point.
Yes. And I would give both the movie and the book. I know we don't normally do numbers.
Don't give it a number.
No numbers? Okay.
Why would you give it a number? You just spent 2 hours and 45 minutes explaining how you feel about it. A number is the TLDR of a podcast, which is really not our 9 out of 10.
Yeah, 10 out of 10. No, I would say that the movie and the book are equally as good. So if you're a book person, read the book. If you're a movie person, watch the movie. And quite honestly, we don't do this that often, but I'm curious to see what other people have to say about this one in particular, because it is so broad and there's so many different ways you can approach it. Let us know what you think about it. Let us know if you were similarly depressed or had issues watching it at night, because I would not blame you.
Yeah, how many parts did you watch this
in?
Because it took me 2
how
sessions.
Many pieces, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us in this discussion of The Road. We will be back next time with... Oh, shit. I don't know what we're going to be back with next time. I don't know if I actually set out a book. I was so focused on recording this one. You know what? I think next time we will watch Pulp Fiction. Next time, join us for the discussion of Pulp Fiction by Quentin Tarantino.
Zed's dead, baby.
Zed is dead.